Chapter 10 Torment. The pleasant summer winds of the 6th floor were replaced by suffocating heat of hellish proportions. Lord Ulbert had guided them through another gate, and now the group was standing in front of a decrepit church. Around them were rivers of molten lava. In the distance, he could see a seemingly active volcano, as it was spewing out magma and clouds of ash. Nigan looked up and briefly felt both awe and fear. The sky was encompassed in a blanket of crimson blood. For a moment, he thought the sky was going to rain down torrents of blood on him any second now. The black clouds overhead were certainly not helping at diverting these thoughts of his. He snapped his head back down after hearing a shriek which threatened to destroy his eardrums. The reality of his situation hadn't exactly kicked into his psyche yet, but now he felt his heart furiously thumping against his chest in primal fear. An unimaginable count of demons were casually roaming around, not paying much attention to the silently horrified Nigan. They were not really doing anything of the sorts, but it did not really matter to him, as he could only think of nothing but worst-case scenarios depicting the demons and their supposed victims. Two of the nearest demons did, however, react to their presence. As much as Nigan did not want any part in this, he had to bear with their malevolent auras approaching him. Nigan instinctively straightened his posture, and he warily watched the demons kneel before Lord Ulbert. He made sure to remember what they looked like, as they might make a reappearance in the foreseeable future. One was a demoness bore the body of a scantily clad human woman, which, admittedly, was rather appealing to Nigan for a split second. But that thought was immediately crushed by what seemed to be an uncanny appearance of a crow's head replacing the region above her neck. The other was a massive scaled demon with a horn's thick tail and two fiery wings. If Nigan had anything to say about this specific creature, it would be that it was single-handedly the best representation of what a demon would look like. If these terrible demons are the first to greet us, what other abominations lay ahead of us that guards this insidious domain? Nigan shuddered as he could not prevent himself imagining the other creatures lurking about. He became momentarily distracted upon feeling the scorching ash-filled air reach his nostrils. It was no wonder to Nigan that this place's living standards here would be the most detrimental to humans, considering its hellish inhabitants. He pulled out a handkerchief from his coat pocket and put it in front of his mouth and nose. Once he felt his sinuses clear up a little bit, the clairvoyance of the situation gradually began to settle down on his mind. After meeting an actual demon god, these two demonic creatures didn't instill as much fear in comparison. But his years of leading the Sunlight Scripture had driven his instincts to work in different ways compared to others. Those demons, in his eyes, would only be considered as pitiful runts to someone such as Lord Ulbert. Judging by how the goat demon barely paid them any attention, it would not be wrong for him to assume such a thing. Guided past them, the group walked inside the church where, standing in front of a toppled-over altar, a demon in a reddish suit with white stripes waited for them. Get as much information out of them as you can. If you suspect anyone is lying, send them straight to Neuronist. When you are done, send them to Tabula's lab. Lord Ulbert addressed the demon. Nigan could now see that the demon in question was receiving much more attention compared to the lesser ones. As you command, Father. I will provide you with the results of my information gathering post-haste, the demon replied eagerly. He gave an immaculate bow before the demon god. Father. So this demon who killed many gods is the son of Lord Ulbert. Nigan thought with growing interest. Naturally, such information was critical to long-term survival. Of course, there was currently no way of figuring out all of the hierarchies and familiar bonds that were already pre-established within the mysterious realm. The demon wasted no time in starting the confession gathering. Each member was given a stone plaque, a handful of paper sheets, and a magical pen. Write down every piece of information you find valuable. If anyone tries to hide even the tiniest slithers of data beneficial to Nazarick, you will be sent to our interrogation specialist. The demon said in a pleasant voice with a sadistic smirk on his face. It was as if he actually hoped anyone was foolish enough to do just that. Not wanting to take any risks, Nigan started to scribble down everything he knew about the Holy Vault. He was the only one among the captured scripture members to ever be inside the most guarded place of the theocracy. In an ironic twist, divulging this sacred information would not get him killed, but instead grant him salvation. While everyone was frantically writing, the demon was walking among them, with Nigan being unable to help but briefly look up when he walked past him. In the corner of his eye, he saw that the demon had suddenly stopped walking, now being in front of one of the men who looked up with widened eyes. It is terribly rude to go out and send a hidden message, especially when you have been assigned a job. The demon leaned forward and stared down the man, who immediately shrank in fear. That imbecile. Did 26 really think they would let us use a message spell? Nigan continued writing while observing the scene from the corner of his eye. From the moment he arrived, he had felt a subtle field surrounding them. At first, it was hard to discern its purpose. At first he tried to look through the eyes of his own summon, but couldn't actually see anything. After some time, however, Nigan soon realized the connection between him garnering blank results and this enigmatic field. It was still unconfirmed, but there was a strong likelihood that the same field he felt from the beginning thwarted any sort of one, if not, two-way communication between his men and outside receivers in charge of reconnaissance. The Windflower sculpture would be an example of people who were responsible for espionage missions. Either way, this was still a horrible turn of events. The inability to break through this anti-reconnaissance field would become a massive thorn to the theocracy. Nigan knew this the most out of everyone. This meant that even the seventh seed of the Black Scripture, or in other words, the infamous, Thousand League astrologer, would not be able to observe what had happened today. Her task at reporting back the outcome of the mission back to the Cardinals would be met with frustrating insufficiency due to an apparent lack of data. Nigan started to hear more blabbering from one of his men, which gave him both unease and second-hand embarrassment. He wanted to tell his subordinate how folly it was to continue making up excuses. He could not do a single thing, however, knowing what consequences were waiting for him if he were to do so. I just tried to assure my family about the situation. Please, I didn't mean to act so selfishly. The scripture member tried to explain himself, and it sounded like he was talking even faster as though time was momentarily sped up for him. Before it could turn out into a hysterical explanation, the demon had cut him off with some sort of control magic. As entertaining as it would be to hear more of your pathetic drivel, there are far more important matters for me to deal with at the moment. The demon motioned for his subordinates to take the man away and resumed his walk. Nigan felt a pang of guilt at seeing one of his fellow comrades leave. It was likely the man was already being sent to execution for having disobeyed an order. No, it would actually be a godsend for him to die immediately. Learning from Lord Ulbert's personality and this demon's immediate resorting to control magic, these creatures would not be so kind as to grant them a swift death. After a full circle, he stopped in front of Nigan. The demon's aura was now bearing towards him with full force. The leader, pardon me. Ex-leader of the Sunlight Scripture, Nigan Grid Lewin. Am I correct? Nigan was not surprised about his identity already being found out. He maintained a calm demeanor and responded accordingly, not wanting to waste any more time than necessary. He was not about to follow in the footsteps of the previous man. Yes, my lord. What sort of artifacts are held in this vault you are describing? I was only permitted to read the holy texts, so I do not know any details, but everything held within had come from the gods and is beyond the mortal ability to replicate, lord. I see. And where is this vault located and how is it guarded? The vault is located in an underground complex under the Cathedral of Light. The door can be opened by a special spell known only by the cardinals, and at the entrance is stationed a single person armed with holy artifacts. I have no further detail about her as that information was classified. Your contribution is noted and acknowledged. Write down all the details you can about this place and how to locate it. Once you have finished, you will have the privilege to become the first test subject of Lord Tabula Ooal Gown, the god of knowledge. Towards the end of his words, the demon had spoken with a noticeable reverence in his tone when he uttered the name of a god. Again, Nigan made sure to write that name down in his mental notes. I'll be the first. That might work out in my favor, and I gave myself a chance to show my dedication and hopefully rid myself of lengthy torment. One can hope. Nodding to himself, Nigan resumed the task with utmost diligence. It took a few hours to write down everything he thought his new masters would be interested in knowing. At one point, he had to sit down on the scorching hot stone with the stone tablet in his lap. His enchanted pants and coat were not enough to fully protect him from the burns forming on his legs, but sitting like this was the only viable position. Once he was finished, one of the small imps guided him to his next destination. A foolish man would have thought this was his chance to escape, but Nigan knew better. There was no escape from this hellish place, only a path forward and a vague hope he could survive the trials. The halls he ended up in after the hellish landscape was a work of art. The artwork, the intricate engravings on the doors and columns, was a marvel to witness. Where are we? Nigan asked the imp in amazement. This is the 9th floor of Nazareth. The small demon replied without turning around. He flew forward at a slow pace, so it wasn't difficult to keep up even with all the distractions. The 9th floor. If my memory is correct, not even the gods were capable of getting this far. I cannot believe I'm saying this, but I'm walking where the 6 could have not since eons past. The sheer surreality of the whole experience to Nigan was undeniable. But there was no time for him to linger on these thoughts any longer, as he was later led to another area. Along the way, each door he went past was apparently guarded by various sorts of monsters. Some looked almost human, but the uncanny resemblance was more disturbing compared to the others who were grotesque beyond all reason. Pay attention, human. The Supreme Ones live here, the imp answered with a mild tone of arrogance. Nigan's semi-open mouth snapped shut as the imp answered the question he himself was about to ask. I understand. Are the Supreme Ones you are referring to the same as the gods of this realm? Yes. I had almost forgotten people such as you exist. Ones who are unfortunate to be born without this knowledge. The Supreme Ones were once commonly referred to as the players who joined the Great Guild of Ains ul Gaun. I suppose that the term may or may not have the same weight it had once carried, so calling them gods would be the most fitting one. I should remember that when speaking about the gods of Nazareth. The denizens of this realm surely held their leaders in the utmost reverence. The imp led Nigan through one of the guarded areas. His next destination was closer than he thought. The room that came into the view was fit for the gods. Each object and piece of furniture was made with such care that a mortal like him needed to wonder how they were made. But his stay in this area of absolute luxury would not last. The imp moved forward and opened another set of doors leading him into what looked like a lab area. A monster defying all reason dressed in purple robes looked up from a notebook he was writing in while sitting by a simple metallic table. His overly long spindly fingers had membranes between them while the bald head had a plethora of tentacles seemingly moving of their own volition. Just to be on the safe side, Nigan kneeled and exclaimed with a tone befitting a soldier. My lord, I have come as the first test subject of Lord Tabula Ooal Gaun. Lord Tabula, the rest of the test subjects will arrive once the information gathering is finished. The imp bowed midair. First one here already? I guess we can start then. Tabula responded with a deep guttural tone. He closed the notebook and put it back in his inventory. With curious eyes, he inspected the man with a scar on his face. Is healing magic not readily available that such a scar has been left on your face? I left it on purpose as a constant reminder of my past failure. Nigan looked up to face the dreadful-looking god. A widespread ritual practice in your culture or just a personal preference? Tabula continued the questioning. The practice of leaving visible scars was common among many cultures throughout the Earth's history. Personal one, my lord. One who embraces the scars of his mistakes is bound to learn from them. A man of your determination would be a great asset to Nazareth. In the event that you survive your trials, that is. What's your name? Tabula asked, taking another notebook out of his inventory. Nigan Grid Lewin, my lord. Just Nigan will suffice. I'm afraid I'm not that good with names. Tabula scribbled down his name and then asked a follow-up question. Have you given thought to what sort of race you would like to switch to? Forgive me if this is too much of a selfish request, but if it is possible, I would prefer to retain my ability to cast fourth-tier magic and keep the talent that lets me empower my summons. Then we have few options. My race, the Brain Eaters, are naturally highly intelligent. Another option would be a dragonoid, but that race is more strength-oriented. A more universalist option would be a doppelganger. Of course, there always is an option to go for the good old lich or a demon, but those two options I prefer to leave for later experiments or to my peers, whose expertise lies in such races. In either case, your knowledge cap should increase after the race change. The mental endeavor of having to keep all of that information not going through one ear and out the other was anything but trivial. Despite that, the god had rattled all of that without even stopping to take a breather, giving Nigan a better idea of how extremely knowledgeable he was. Tabula motioned for Nigan to stand up and follow him deeper into the laboratory. Still, to look like this god, how should I approach this? I simply cannot be so straightforward as to tell this god I do not want to be a brain eater. I need to approach this situation carefully, it seems. Is it a safe assumption you prefer to keep a near-human appearance? It doesn't matter that much to me as long as my combat ability is not diminished, my lord, but if it's possible then I would prefer to look human or near-human. Nigan did his best to not insult the god who now held his life by a thread. Very well. I can go with your suggestion. Get on and prepare. The process won't be pleasant. Tabula led him to a metal table with straps that would be used to restrain him. Oh, and remove most of your clothing. If the first session is successful they might get torn apart. Following the instructions, Nigan stripped down to just pants and got on the cold metal table. He prepared to be strapped to the table, but to his confusion, the god simply waved his hand. The gesture was not giving off any semblance of understanding to Nigan in the slightest. It must have done something to him as he soon felt the entirety of his body stiffen up. His mind remained intact, leaving him to make a swift conclusion. The gesture from earlier must have been related to the paralysis Lord Ulbert had put him in. Let's see, I suppose I might be able to learn something from this, so it would do well for me to double-check my notes, Tabula said absent-mindedly as he pulled out a velvet-colored notebook from his inventory. He made it hover in front of him while putting one of his hands on Nigan's chest. A moment later, a current of intense pain shot up through every nerve in his body. Nigan clamped his teeth together to not scream. In such pain, every second was like an eternity. To his dismay, his body and mind was refusing to go into shock no matter how much pain he was in. That's odd. Only the body temperature was lowered. Did I miss something? Where did I? Never mind, there it is. Tabula made the notebook flip itself as another session of torment began. Nigan did not know if all gods harbored such cruelty such as him, but he at least understood they were not exactly the forgiving type given what side he was initially on. The dark god of knowledge in particular seemed to be indifferent to how much agony he caused and just let out cold, impartial remarks, or sometimes chuckled at his own jokes as he took notes of the tormentous process. It reminded Nigan of how he often made jokes to his former men during some of the Sunlight Scriptures missions in culling various beastmen tribes. But no matter what these new gods were like behind their masks, he would survive and be remade into something more fitting to serve the monster gods that had come to claim the world for themselves. Yes. I will survive this. I will see to it that I become reborn and witness the new age. I will not fail. I will not fail. Nigan repeated the last 4 words in his head again and again as he continued to endure his torturous session. With the tiredness that came with a human body and the almost tortuous aura of albedo taking its toll, Ains switched back to his natural form the moment he was back in Nazareth. At this point, it was close to midnight and the planning for the next steps was left for tomorrow. After extensive fieldwork, there was just one thing every bone in his body ached for: a hot, relaxing bath. Using the rather quiet atmosphere of a late night, Ains walked to the spa area with a slow stroll, trying to remember what sort of bathing experiences the luxury resort provided. Should I go for a jacuzzi? I haven't had one before. Or maybe one of those fancy salt baths. Or maybe a sauna. There were so many wonderful options to choose from. If he remembered correctly, there even was a bath that supposedly mimicked a geyser. I guess I'll go for a simple bubble bath first. Playing with bubbles sounds fun. He spoke to himself aloud out of habit. Bubble bath is an excellent choice, Lord Ains. A maid he had forgotten about said enthusiastically. One quick emotional suppression later and he could reply without sounding too embarrassed. I'm glad you agree with me, for. That was embarrassing. I should be more mindful that I'm not alone anymore. The habit of speaking to himself aloud came to the surface only when he thought himself alone, which for the past few days was only when he was in the bedroom. Once he reached the spa area, 4 obviously offered to wash him, but somehow he got the insistent maid to leave him alone under the premise that he just planned to soak in the water and nothing else was needed. The spa area upkeep was left to a team of stone golems who automatically evacuated all areas with guests in them, leaving only the 2 lifeless stone statues depicting lions as company. With all his accessories left in the dressing area where the maid got her way and helped him undress, Ains entered one of the smaller bathrooms made with a bamboo forest theme in mind. The bath itself was large enough to let at least 5 or 6 people enjoy it simultaneously, so there was more than enough room even for his now rather large frame. The hot water topped with the fruity smell of the liquid soap lulled him into a trance-like state in no time. This is the life, he said aloud, taking the small wooden basket and pouring the water over his skeletal face. Not needing to care about breathing or soap getting in his eyes only enhanced the experience. After repeating the process a few times, Ains put the basket aside and slid deeper into the water. The automatic heating system assured that the water would be at a perfect temperature indefinitely. But, as always, fate had other plans for him. Not even 10 minutes later, his solitude was interrupted by someone opening the door without knocking. Ains ignited the flames in his eye sockets since they served as a visual indicator of when he was using his sight and turned to look who had come in. The moment he saw who the intruder was, he froze in the spot, with his first instinct being to cover up. Albedo. He moved one hand between his legs even though he was in his natural skeletal form, and even if he wasn't, the foam would have shielded him from prying eyes anyway. Lord Ains, I was hoping you would like company, Albedo said, taking a step closer. Her curvaceous figure was hidden only behind a towel wrapped around her midsection. His mind went blank. I guess so. Albedo smiled, then dropped the towel on the ground, giving him a full view of her gorgeous body. Even the expressionless face of a skeleton gave her enough hints that Ains was enjoying the sight of her body. With slow, deliberate steps, she walked forward, swinging her hips seductively. Even though Albedo was the second woman he had seen naked during the past few days, her presence was not comparable to Buku's, who flashed everyone by accident. His gaze slowly moved down first to her massive, perfectly shaped breasts, then her narrow, toned waist, and finally to obscenity detected. A female has entered a male bathing area. Purity protocol activated. A loud voice interrupted their moment. Lucifer. Ains immediately recognized the voice of the notorious prankster. The two lion statues rushed past him and tackled the surprised succubus to the ground. Damn it. Albedo. Ains jumped to his feet. The two statues were around level 80 and could easily handle a surprised player, or in this case, Albedo. If he shows up, I will lock Lucifer in a room with all of his damn creations and toss away the key, Ains swore, carefully aiming a reality slash spell to hit at least one of the golems and avoid hitting Albedo. Albedo let out a screaming growl and punched one of the statues with her left hand, which was the only one not pinned down, but it wasn't enough to get the golem off her. Confident that he would not hit the succubus, Ains cast the spell, hitting one of the lion statues at its side and knocking it over. Albedo used the opportunity and kicked off the second statue, which hit the wall with a thud. Being freed, she jumped to her feet and instantly was beside Ains with her trusty Bardici in her right hand. I'll take the left one, you deal with the one on the right. Ains shouted out an order and hurled another reality slash at the lion statue that was already recovering from the first strike. Out of the two, it clearly had it easy. The second statue was on the receiving end of countless chops from the furious succubus, being reduced to rubble in mere moments. Two more slashes were enough to deal with the last standing statue, which fell apart into a stony rubble. Albedo hit both piles a few more times and then said, panting, I am sorry for causing all this. It's not your fault. No one knew that those statues were golems and programmed to attack. Ains assured her. Finding courage deep within, he approached Albedo to comfort her. The whole situation clearly had stressed her out. Albedo looked up at him distraught, still standing in a fighting stance covered in dust with her hair being in a disheveled state. Save for a few cuts and bruises, she seemed to be unhurt. He once again could not put a coherent thought together. In the current state, she looked as alluring as ever. Ains got close to her and stretched out his arms to hug her, but hesitated and froze on the spot. If the Overlord side of him was always in control of the situation, then Satoru was the complete opposite and became cripplingly indecisive when dealing with women, especially the one that was naked in front of him. Albedo picked up on his intent and jumped into Ains's embrace, pressing her soft body against his skeletal frame. Lord Ains, a defensive protocol activated in your general area. Are you unhurt? Demiurge's frantic voice invaded his mind. As second in command to Albedo when it came to Nazarik's administration, he was alerted to all the commotion, and when Albedo herself didn't respond to the alert, he took the charge. Albedo and I are fine. We stumbled upon another of Lucifer's pranks. Ains replied. I am relieved to hear that. Sebas is on his way with Pleiades, 6-star formation. Demiurge informed him, sounding much calmer. The next moment the battle-made group led by Sebas charged into the bathing area and formed a perimeter around them. Lord Ains. We are ready to protect you. Sebas bowed. Albedo did her best to not snarl at the butler for another interruption but managed to remain calm. The man had done nothing wrong, and showing even less control over herself was not acceptable. She covered herself front and back with her wings and turned to face the head butler. Sweep the entire spa area and remove all inactive golems and statues and move them to the storage area. Use only female force for the female section of the spa and male force for the male section. No one below level 85 is to come into contact with said golems and statues. As you command, Lady Albedo. Sebas bowed. Please provide adequate coverage for Lord Ains and Lady Albedo. He addressed Yuri Alpha and left the area to execute the given orders. Yuri quickly found two robes and together with her sisters helped the two prank victims to dress. I think we should leave them to their work. I'll finish bathing in my quarters. Ains said to Albedo, who still was as distraught as ever. I will send maids to accommodate you, Lord Ains. I'm sorry for the trouble I caused. Albedo said with a bow. Should I? The idea of taking a bath with her was still there. Now being calm after activation of the emotional suppression, he could look at the situation logically. Tabula had pretty much set them both up by changing Albedo's flavor text and asking him to change his. No amount of emotional suppression could erase that. Albedo's intention clearly was to spend time together in an intimate environment, and now the ball was on his side of the field. Time completely stopped for a moment, and in a void stood a timid salaryman facing the highest expression of the undead. She is ours to take care of. You are the feeling part of us, you have to take charge. The Overlord spoke with the deep regal voice towering over the man. I know, but, Satoru spoke back with a much softer voice. There is no but, she is our responsibility. Cowardice is not acceptable. But what if we can't make her happy? What if we are Ain's Ulgaon? The one who stands above all. Failure is not an option. The Overlord stated, seemingly growing even larger. It's easy to say. We have not done this before. Satoru met the burning gaze of his other self. So what? You made those choices. You let Tabula change her settings. You changed our feelings towards her. You accepted the name of Ain's Ulgaon as your own. The dark flames became more intense. Ain's Ulgaon does not know defeat. If you cannot accept that and be what you chose to be, then the Satoru part of us has no purpose. Wait, what do you mean? Satoru stuttered and took a step back. If you cannot take charge and become the man, the god you chose to be, then I will. Either do what we chose or fade away. The Overlord voice became unbearably loud as he spoke with the usual indifference in his tone. I won't just fade away. I can be in charge, damn it. Nothing but pure spite drove him forward. No. You won't be in charge of anything. I am Ain's Ulgaon and you are just a figment of my imagination. Satoru took a step forward and pushed the undead figure back. Is that so? The Overlord laughed dryly. Become Ain's Ulgaon and you won't even need me. It looked like the skeletal face twisted into a smile and then faded away. It was all him once again. Ain's returned to the present moment and feeling the high of the mental victory achieved in his own mind, he grabbed the succubus by her waist. You need to relax and bathe as well. He told her and teleported them both to his private bathroom. Albedo yelped in surprise but quickly recovered, seeing her beloved being so resolute, which simply drove her over the edge. She pressed against him, kissing his front teeth, and purred. I am delighted to keep you company, my lord. The bath as usual was already prepared and perpetually kept in that state in case Ain's wanted to take one immediately. He led Albedo towards it and held her hand as she got in first. With her pressing against his skeletal form and letting out sighs of content, his thoughts returned to the mental battle he had fought in his mind. If I keep being my indecisive old me, I will likely lose myself fully to my undead side. I can't let that happen. I will be more courageous and decisive. He glanced over at the beautiful woman that was sitting next to him with her eyes closed and a subtle smile on her face. I know what I want. I won't hesitate and doubt myself. Ain's pulled the doppelganger ring out of his inventory and put it on. Before activating it, he touched Albedo's cheek and asked. I know I said we should take things slow, but would you like to stay with me tonight? Albedo's eyes popped open instantly, becoming wide as saucers. Yes. She screamed, startling the maid who had returned from the spa with Ain's gear. Startling at her own reaction, Albedo blushed and added in a quiet tone, I would love to, Lord Ain's. I think the demon form would be more suitable than the human one when I'm with her. Ain's decided and activated the ring. You should just call me Ain's. His lips locked with hers the moment they were formed. As you command, Ain's. She replied with a moan, eagerly kissing him back. Puro leaned back into the sofa and drank the last of the wine from the glass. Etzli, sitting in his lap, did the same. Drinking with human lips is so much easier. He had to admit to himself, still in the elven form he had assumed during the adventure outside the tomb. Not wanting to waste the opportunity, he planned to give this form a full test drive before switching back to his natural, avian one. Should I refill the glass for you, Lord Puro? Lupus, the maid of the day, asked. For a moment she was replaced by one of the homunculus maids while she and her sisters responded to the spa incident. But since they were below the power level of dealing with the hidden golems, she and the other Pleiades could return to their assigned posts while Sebas assembled teams capable of resolving the problem. I think I have had enough, Puro replied. Maybe you want more? He asked Etzli since her glass was empty. No, I had enough as well. The vampire timidly responded. The idea of bossing around someone as highly ranked as a Pleiades maid was too much for her, even if her loving master let her do it. Suit yourself. He playfully tickled her, to which Etzli responded with giggles. Lupus bit her cheek to keep a neutral expression and stepped away, resuming a position by the door. Being late as is, Puro was about to pick up Etzli to carry her to the bedroom when an aura of overwhelming lust hit them like a nuclear blast. Puro clenched his fist, suppressing the desire to tear off his concubine's dress and take her right there on the sofa with Lupus as an audience, to figure out what was going on. Etzli wasn't helping the situation either, as her hand went down his pants and she started to aggressively work on his neck with wet kisses and playful bites. What the hell? Puro heard Lupus let out a whining sound as she pressed herself against the wall and clamped her legs together. His rather acute sex detection instincts came to one conclusion. Albedo. With her being level 100, her aura of lust, a natural ability of all succubi and incubi, was simply devastating. So Ains is finally getting lucky. Do your best, man. He sent a silent encouragement to his friend and carried his uncontrollably horny concubine to the bedroom. 3 hours later, Etzli was out cold while Puro was still tormented by the aura of lust that showed no signs of disappearing or lessening. Damn, they're still at it. He did his best to resist the aura's effects, and while his attempts at keeping a clear head were working, sleep was completely out of the question. Frustrated, he jumped out of bed, put on a robe, and walked back out to the main area to find something that would let him pass the time. I should talk with them tomorrow. If this becomes a daily thing, the 9th floor is fucked and fucking, I guess. Puro couldn't help but think about the implications of what Albedo's aura would do to Nazaryk's denizens in the long term. He heard a quiet moan the moment he opened the door, which was then hastily muffled. He caught Lupus pulling out her hand from under her skirt and straightening out, being completely red in the face. Lord Puro. She greeted him with a strained voice. Be at ease. It must be hard to endure this. He waved around in the air. I can manage. Her voice bordered on a whimper. Be at ease. Puro repeated, flashed her a smile, and then looked at the bar to pick something to drink. It must be pure torture for her. He glanced at the maid who barely held it together while walking towards him with an unsteady walk to perform her duties. What would you like, my lord? Lupus asked. Pour me a glass of brandy and get yourself one too, I see you need it. Lupus did as ordered and downed her glass in one go. Better? Puro asked after drinking his shot. Lupus gave him a pained look. Look, you can leave my quarters, for now, to go somewhere private. Or get together with a guy if you have someone in mind. I can be by myself for a few hours. Lupus looked down and shuffled around. Sorry, I didn't mean to be insensitive. He apologized to the maid, noticing how uncomfortable she suddenly became. No, it's not that, Lord Puro. She held her hands together while leaning forward. I would be such a dick if I used the situation. Puro observed the flustered maid. He had a decent idea of what she was implying, but it might have been just the effects of the mind, clouded by the overwhelming aura. Look, if it's too hard for you right now, you should leave. I have my limits too, you know. If you are genuinely interested in having some fun with me, it would be better if we talked about it when our heads are clear. Why? I know what I want. She asked in frustration but just bowed and added with a whimper. I'm sorry. Are you sure about it? Yes. A few more hours later and Puro was still tossing in bed with Etzli to his right and Lupus to his left. The effects of the lust aura finally started to lessen and he could let out a sigh of relief. If Ains tries to give me shit for this, I'll pin everything on him. He looked at the soundly sleeping maid. It took about 2 hours for both girls to wake up. Luckily for him, Etzli didn't show any signs of jealousy or animosity towards Lupus, who seemingly shared the sentiment. One quick shower later and he was ready to start the day. The first order of business was to get breakfast and then go talk with Ains about the situation he unwittingly had caused. Hey sis, you up for breakfast? He messaged Buku, mostly curious about how her night went. To his knowledge, she hadn't picked any entertainment for herself before this night. Yeah, give me a minute and I'll meet you at the restaurant. I'll contact Albert and Tabula to join us as well. I want to tear Ains a new one. Figured out everything, huh? I am not stupid. Walking the 9th floor halls surely was a surreal experience. Everyone who had any sort of libido was either in a zombie-like state or on the verge of breaking down. The restaurant staff was no better. He sat down and told the waiter that he was in no rush and that everyone could take their time. Buku arrived moments later looking fine. Hey bro, I hope your girl is still alive. She is doing great, but she had some help yesterday. Oh. Lupus. I would ask what Ains will think, but today he can just fuck right off. Buku sat down next to him and opened the menu. That bad? I grabbed one manservant. The guy was a solid 8 under the mask, but he could not keep up all night, not that I blame him. Buku yawned. That's at least something. Sure. But if this shit becomes a regular occurrence, I need to prepare. Just relocate to other floors. Albedo's aura didn't leave the 9th floor. Albert suggested as he approached the table. So you just ran away like a coward. Puro mocked him. If I'm getting laid, I'll do it on my own terms, not because Albedo can't control herself. Albert ignored his taunt. What about Tabula? I'm curious how he dealt with the situation. He just blocked Albedo's aura with a shield and carried on with his work. Apparently, he knew how to deal with something like that beforehand. Buku reported her findings. Figures. That guy is a walking enigma. Albert remarked. Either way, since I had a lot of time, Demi and I made a golf course on the 7th floor and made plans to create a relief service if this goes on. You plan to make a brothel within Nazareth? Buku raised a brow. Just as I thought, you didn't care about golf. No, not exactly a brothel, but a group of succubi and incubi would have surely helped, don't you think? Planning to summon a bunch of them? Puro perked up. At some point, yes, among other types of demons. I want some, Puro said like a kid who was waiting for a Christmas present. I want some too. Buku joined in. Noted. Albert grinned. But both of you will owe me a favor. Deal with the devil. Sure, why not? Puro chuckled. On a more serious note, what are we doing about the situation? Albert asked, dropping the dealmaker demeanor. I'll talk to them. I was planning to do it regardless. Puro said. While they were chatting, the waiter showed up with the food he had ordered. You. Ains does not need high fives in this situation, you birdbrain. Buku masterfully stole a piece of fried potato from her brother's plate and tossed it in her mouth. Who else, then? You. He will go into full shutdown if you bitch about his first time. Puro shot back and slapped her hand when she reached for another piece. Point taken. Just drill into his and Albedo's heads that this cannot go on. Buku glared at him. Her order was still on the way and her bastard of a brother could not be bothered to wait for everyone to have a meal before starting to eat. Sure thing. Puro dug into his food full force. After breakfast, he went straight for Ains's quarters. Ground zero, so to speak. He knocked on the door and was let in by Yuri, who on the surface looked fine. I guess she, as an undead, was not as affected. Puro reasoned, walking in. Albedo was sitting on the sofa, combing her hair and shining like the morning sun while Ains was slumped down next to her, looking even more lifeless than usual. Hey, you two lovebirds. You know you both caused quite a stir. Puro greeted both. I know. Yuri found 4 passed out on the floor and she is now being treated for overexposure. Ains said with a barely audible whisper. I was not aware my aura would have such an effect. Especially on me. I apologize for causing you some distress. Albedo said apologetically. I will start dealing with the aftermath in a few moments. Me. I'm fine. So are Lupus and Etzli, but you hit all of the 9th floor. Puro said. He sat down opposite Ains. She must have sucked him dry. Lucky bastard. He observed his friend who barely made any movements. Oh, then it is paramount I get it under control. Albedo's cheeks grew redder. You can ask Tabula. He apparently knew instantly how to shield himself. Father knew. Albedo's eyes lit up in surprise, but she quickly snapped out of it. Of course he would know. He did create me. I'll be off to perform my duties and speak with Father when I have time. Albedo got up, then leaned down, kissed Ains on the cheek, and walked off. So how's it feel to have a girl? Puro asked Ains with a cheerful laugh. She didn't stop all night. At some point I lost the demon form, but she just went on. I didn't know my skeletal form could feel such things. Sounds fun. I would give my left nut for such an experience. Puro chuckled. Maybe Tabula can give Albedo another sister. If this goes on, I will die. Ains said weakly. And we will high-five your smiling corpse at the funeral. Ha ha. Ains waved his hand at him and then let it fall back on the sofa. You look like you could use a nap. Puro stood up and patted Ains on the shoulder. I have a lot to do. Not a chance. Puro shook his head. Hey Yuri, your task is to see that Ains sleeps for a few hours. If he tries to work or leave his quarters, you call me. Lord Puro, I deeply apologize, but Lord Ains's orders supersede yours. Yuri bowed. Fine, I'll rest. He got up and slowly moved toward the bedroom. Wake me if there is an emergency. Sure thing, buddy, but we can manage things without you for a few hours, Puro shouted after him and then leaned close to Yuri and whispered. If he sleeps less than 2 hours, you send me a message. Lord Puro, I can't. You'll send me a message or I'll give Lupus a bucket of coffee, all the sweets she can eat, and send her in your direction with hand drums and a trumpet. Puro twisted his elven face into an evil smirk. I will notify you if Lord Ains does not take a proper rest. Yuri gulped with a shudder from imagining her sister even more active than usual. Puro flashed her a smile and left Ains's quarters. There was another person he had to speak with and she sure as hell wouldn't be happy that Albedo got to Ains first. Bonus story, creating an artifact. I know we caused some trouble for everyone, but don't you think this is a bit of an overkill for compensation? Ains asked Buku while both watched a massive crab-like creature work the forge. You promised to make it up to me, so this is what I want. Buku replied. But why scarletite? Even crafting it costs about 3 million. Ains raised his voice and got hit with emotional suppression. Ains, do you want me to school Albedo on how to keep you on a short leash? Buku dropped her voice. No. But this is blackmail. You could have picked cheaper materials. It's not like it can break so easily. I need it. It is the only thing that will get the job done. Buku watched with glee how the object took form and started to cool down. The crab-like creature took one last critical look at his handiwork and then handed it to a black arachne who started to apply some final touches and make the object softer and easier to use. I hope you will put it to good use. Ains said, looking at the final result. The comb was at least a relic tier item, if not fully going into the legendary tier. I will. Buku smiled, accepting the comb. This one should be strong enough to survive Aura's hair. A moment later, she was standing in the treehouse's main room greeted by her 2 children. Look what I got. She probably presented the comb to the twins. Me first. Aura shouted in excitement and plopped in her mother's lap the moment Buku sat down. Yes, you first this time. Buku grabbed Aura's waist to hold her in place as the battle of all battles began. The unbreakable comb met the uncombable hair. A lot of screams were made and tears were shed, but in the end, Buku let her daughter go and wiped the sweat off her brow. The girl's hair was finally defeated, having been combed to its last strand. The uncensored version can be found here, web links. Edited by Zermeister. Anne, thank you for reading the story, and if you have caught up to the latest chapter, you can check out my other work or join my Discord server, link is in my profile where additional chapters are available, or if you are interested in becoming a beta reader. Reading by Tofrel, Ethel07, Alessandro, Sad_Smiles, Swiss Chocolatus, and Atero. 5 comments 0 vote. Extra chapter, Different Fates. Anne, this is a double update, so don't forget to check chapter 10 first. This little extra chapter is partly a what-if side story, and if readers are interested, I would love to add such chapters at the end of each volume. The gentle forces of wind pushed around the golden sand and bent the dried blades of grass. The emerald blue sea blended together with the bright sky. On this shore, a man with a 3-piece gray suit sat cross-legged with a floating octaract in front of him. His brown eyes looked at the countless sides of the 8-dimensional structure as numerous arms that overlapped each other manipulated the sides of the object. The sun shined unmoving in the sky, as if day and night cycles didn't exist. The serene scene was interrupted by a girl about 15 to 16 years old popping up next to the man. She was dressed in simple sandals with black baggy pants and a tight tank top. Her short blood-red hair ignored the wind, staying perfectly still, and her purple eyes locked onto the object man was tinkering with. How long are you going to mess with that thing? She leaned forward, holding her hips. Till the work is done. The man replied. You think you can activate it without destroying this reality? She plopped down next to the man. We'll see. Hey, I think this angle is off. The girl pointed at one of the countless ever-changing sides. From the 6th dimension, maybe. That is not important on the full scale. He waved his hand over the crooked lines, straightening it out. Can I start making one? She asked after observing the intricate work for a while. There are a lot simpler things you should learn first. I know, but your event manipulation is boring. You never do anything just for the fun of it. I have yet to see you just kick someone's ass. The girl sighed and slumped down. Violence is too easy. It takes the enjoyment out of the game. The man turned his head towards the girl with a subtle smile. Appealing to the desires of the figments of reality, making deals with them, whispering ideas in their minds indistinguishable from their own, that is where the mastery over realities lay. You told me that about 1,000,000 times before. The girl leaned back, laying down on the warm sand. You wanted to learn from me. I did not force you to be my apprentice. But I want to do something fun with it. Make fun stories with their lives, not play against others. The girl grabbed a handful of sand and tossed it into the wind. What is the point of all this power if I can't have any fun with it? Then pick an unclaimed timeline or reality and have your fun. No one is stopping you. The man dismissed the octaract and turned to look at the girl. You should have learned by now that no one is stopping you from doing whatever you want if you are not playing with claimed realities and timelines. Oh, that I could do. But first, show me the one where you are creating gods. She sat up with her face lighting up in excitement. You'll have to narrow it down a bit more. You know the one. Everyone is talking about it. Oh, that one. The man smiled. Sure, knock yourself out, just don't change anything. A sphere, about 1 meter in diameter, appeared in front of them. The girl pushed her face close to it and changed what the sphere was showing at a lightning speed by subtle movements of her fingers. Ah, I hoped you would pair those two together. She pointed at Ains and Buku. Their union unfortunately provides suboptimal results for the main goal. I'll just take a split timeline and pair them. I want to see where it goes. You can see all possible outcomes just by observing that point of the multiverse as a whole. The man stated, expanding the sphere's view to encompass every timeline where Ains and Buku existed. Knowing all outcomes is boring. I want the excitement of seeing just one play out just like I want to. How about you take this timeline and get the desired outcome with the least amount of tempering possible? He switched the sphere's view again. But there they are just humans. I see, you are turning it into a lesson again. You know, you have the ability to suck all the fun out of everything. She grumbled. Fun is a matter of perspective. If you are not in a learning mood, then go do something else. The man said dryly. I know. But the way you play games is too precise. Like solving equations. I want to paint pictures, make art. She changed the sphere into a screen with a flick of her wrist and started to sort out critical points. X. The last seconds painfully ticked away. Few more moments and there would be no more Yggdrasil. 23 hours 59 minutes and 59 seconds. 0 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. The game screen faded, returning him back to VR's base loading screen. Suzuki took the gear off and put it on the small table beside the chair. This was it. The place where he spent most of his free time during his adult life was gone for good. There wasn't even sorrow at this point, just a large, gaping hole in his chest that he could never possibly fill in. Even if he did try to fill it in with the next popular game, he strongly felt it would be a massive waste of time. I'll just sleep on this chair. Satoru didn't even bother to get to his small bed. He sleepily set up the alarm clock at 4 a.m. and dozed off. The week went by listlessly with Satoru watching the tick by in a dull monotony. He did try to look for a new game to play, but it felt like cheating on a deceased partner days after the funeral. There was one other thought that surfaced again and again during this time. I should visit Puro and Buku. I should think of them by their real names, Itsuki and Akari. He had visited them once a few years ago for a small guild member gathering. This thought got more insistent by the day. One afternoon, after a long day's work and a few free game trials, he finally got the courage and wrote an email to the siblings asking if he could visit. There wasn't an immediate response. He waited and waited, but the reply didn't come. That was a stupid idea. Of course, they don't want me to intrude in their lives. He chided himself once again, checking the email before going to sleep. Yet, as always, a little patience was all that he needed to exercise. The next day after work there was a response. Sure thing, Momo, we'll be happy to have you. How about Sunday at 6 p.m? Their new address was located at the bottom of the email. It wasn't too far away from where he lived, so there wasn't even a need to pay for an expensive metro ticket. Since his salary didn't go into the sinkhole that was pay to win games, he could afford to buy a small crate of beer and a pack of sweets as a gift. The siblings lived in a better area than him and their apartment complex didn't look like complete squalor, unlike his. Even the lift was working and he didn't have to climb 25 stories by foot. Finally, the moment of truth came. With a slightly shaking hand, he knocked on the door and waited. Of course, he had already sent a message that it was him at the door so they wouldn't have to think a random stranger was trying to get entry into their home. A lanky man with shoulder-length hair and a 4-day beard, dressed in loose pants and a t-shirt opened the door. He instantly broke into a smile. Momo, you old bones, good to see you. Hey. I brought these, I hope it's enough. Satoru awkwardly presented his gifts. Oh, you shouldn't have. But hey, if you can feed Sis Sweet Tooth, she'll definitely be in a good mood. Itsuki laughed, clapping his friend's shoulder. Come in. Satoru quickly removed the protective suit and followed his friend. The apartment of the siblings was a lot more spacious than his. There was a small kitchen area with a couch and a large TV screen, a separate bathroom, and 2 bedrooms. Akari was sitting at the kitchen table. Same as her brother, she had black, shoulder-length hair and dark brown eyes. Unlike her brother, she seemed to have dressed up a bit and had a blouse and a long skirt. Hey Momo, it's nice you could visit us. She smiled, but then her expression grew sterner. You didn't message the girl as you promised. Satoru froze up, only now remembering that he promised to write to the girl Buku tried to set him up with. Not sure how to get out of the situation, he extended his hand and held the pack of sweets in front of him. Are you trying to bribe me not to be mad? Akari tilted her head and dropped her voice a lot lower. Satoru gulped and nodded his head. Surprised at such a blatant confession, she burst into a high-pitched laughter. You are too damn lucky for your own good. Those are my favorite. Akari grabbed the corner of the table and slowly stood up. Itsuki rushed over to help her, but she just slapped his hand away. With slow, obviously painful steps, she approached Satoru and gently took the sweets out of his hand. If you keep doing this, I'll just have to make good on my threat. For over a year, her back had gotten progressively worse. She hadn't told much of what was happening to her, but her health problems were the reason both Akari and Itsuki stopped playing Yggdrasil. What little he did know didn't paint a picture of a bright future. The operation was an expensive one, and even with her salary she would have to blow all her savings and then some to afford it. And even then the chance of success was only about 70%, leaving that big what if something goes wrong and she spends all her money for nothing. At the same time, if nothing was done, she soon would be unable to walk at all. Satoru could only offer a weak smile in return at her playful taunt. Having playful banter in the game was one thing, but being face to face with her was completely another. Akari was an attractive woman, and because of that his crippling anxiety took over once again. He silently nodded, unsure what else to say or do. Looks like I have a brother-in-law. Itsuki clapped his shoulder with laughter. Let's go settle down on the couch before she finds a ring to put on your finger. Mercifully, Akari didn't tease him for the rest of the evening. Itsuki put on an action film they had seen before and discussed in the game, and everyone settled down sipping the beer Satoru had brought as a gift while Akari devoured the pack of sweets, washing them down with the same beer. At around 11 p.m., he said goodbye to the siblings and went home through the least dangerous route he knew. Time flew so fast. I wish I could have stayed longer. Visiting the siblings became a weekly thing at first, and then he started to hang out with them even 2 or 3 times a week, often helping Itsuki with household chores. One day when he came to their place again, to his surprise only Akari was home. Hey Sato, she greeted him at the door. Come in. Bro is not home tonight. He scored a girl and is out on a date. So I hope you don't mind only my company. Not at all. Satoru followed in and took off the protective suit. There was something different about Akari's appearance. At first, he didn't even notice, but then it hit him. She was wearing makeup. Once he was out of the heavy clothing, Akari leaned in against him and held his arm. Can you help me get to the couch? She gave him a smile. Of course. He gently guided his friend through the now familiar apartment. Unlike previous times when they mostly watched action or fantasy-related stuff, Akari put on some sort of romance anime Satoru had not seen before. They sat watching the movie in silence for a while. Why didn't you write that girl? You know she is still single. Akari suddenly spoke up. I don't know. He stammered out, looking away from her. What did you not know? You did like how she looked in the picture. She didn't give in. Yes. Get real with me for once. Why didn't you ever try? Akari's tone turned soft and soothing. Please tell me why you don't even try. Maybe I can help. Satoru sighed. She won't back down. I should just leave. He stopped the cowardly thought and just spoke his mind. I don't know, I guess I was just afraid. The guy who planned daring raids in the game now says he is afraid. Yggdrasil was just a game. He told a bold-faced lie. It wasn't for you. Don't think I can't see through you. What do you want me to say? Satoru raised his voice. Of what you are afraid of. Akari didn't back down. Can we just drop this? Not this time. We are getting to the bottom of this. What are you afraid of? Tell me. Buku's tone dropped to her normal speaking voice. Satoru looked away and then stood up and was about to leave without saying anything, but he felt her soft arm grab his wrist and hold it. Tell me. Let me go. Sit down. I am not backing out. Akari barked an order. He tried to yank his arm away, but she didn't let it go. He tried it again, hearing her gasp, and finally let go of his arm. He instantly flipped around to come face to face with her again. Akari's face was twisted in pain. She slumped back down into the couch, breathing sharply. I am sorry. I didn't mean to. Just go. She clutched her face with her right hand and continued to breathe sharply. Please forgive me. I didn't mean to hurt you. Satoru's voice became frantic. It's fine. Pills are in that drawer. Akari pointed towards the kitchen. He quickly retrieved a small bottle and handed it to her together with a glass of filtered water. She instantly gulped down a few pills and sat with her eyes closed, still breathing sharply. Satoru stood by the couch, unsure what to say or do. I hurt her. Maybe I should just have told her. Don't stand there like a fool. Either sit down or run like you plan to. Akari said with a strained voice. He sat down and glanced at her. I'm sorry. I told you it's fine. Give me 5 minutes for pills to kick in and I'll be back to normal. They sat in uncomfortable silence for a few minutes. Satoru glanced at her again. It's over. They are not going to talk with me after tonight. I ruined another thing. After sitting unmoving for a while with her eyes closed, she opened her eyes and let out a long sigh. So you're not going to talk? I don't know what to say. Then don't. Be like this. She said coldly. This is it. Maybe I'll just tell her. It's over anyway. Satoru sighed. Because I'm afraid that they will say no, or if they say yes they will just leave once they know the real me. He let out another tired sigh. It's easier to be alone. Everything I care for goes away. Yggdrasil, my mother, and friends. It's only a matter of time before I'm back to nothing. I am afraid too. My health is not getting better. Sooner or later AI will replace voice acting and I will be out of a job. I am holding back my brother from having a family. And even if I decide to marry one of the few men that would still show interest in me, I am terrified that once my back completely gives out and money runs out, I will be tossed in the street to die with other undesirables. Akari's voice broke. You know what is worse in all this? Each time you visit, that tiny sliver of hope that you are not coming here just out of boredom or to get your fix on social interactions. Each time you do not try to date anyone, I get this stupid feeling that maybe you are waiting for me. Like you used to years ago when I still was normal. When I was desirable. Hell, if you have shown at least some incentive back then I would, it does not matter. She glared at Satoru, as she wiped tears out of her eyes. I don't want your pity. I don't need you to come here every other day because you don't know what you want to do with your life and think you are earning some moral points for helping me and Itsuki. I want you to have something more. If you are interested in me, the real broken mess of me, then say so. If not, then grow some fucking balls and ask that girl out. She shouted at him. Satoru looked up at her. Akari was crying with her face twisted in a scowl. I do not need some stupid hope that you will always be there for me. I never even considered how she feels about me being here so often. What should I do? Do I want to be with her for the rest of my life with all the struggles we would face? I wanted to help them because my life is so empty. She has always been beautiful and she understands me and, I do want her. I want to be with you. He finally managed to get out. You, her face lit in surprise. God, you are stupid. But, she smiled. I need a fool who would settle for me. She grabbed Satoru by his shirt and pulled his face close to hers. Promise me you won't leave me, or just feed me a bottle of pills so I fade away in my sleep if you do. She said with a whisper. I won't leave you. You know what a foolish man like you deserves. She asked and pulled Satoru in for a kiss before he could answer. There you go. 3 moves and they are together. The girl excitedly announced, jumping up to her feet. One was unnecessary. The man remarked as he watched his apprentice work. I just added it to make it quicker. The girl sat back down and continued tinkering with the timeline. Their life is still shit. Feel free to make it however you wish. The timeline is yours now. Unless I remade the whole world, their lives would still be bad. I could make them roll in cash so their lives are better, but where is fun in that? Hey, I know. I will send them together to the same world as Momonga and Buku. Just 2 of them. She announced. It doesn't have to be the same world. You can choose whatever world you want for them. Now you are talking. So many options, I'll let the dice decide. She pulled out a small dice that constantly changed around the number of sides and numbers on them. A very strategic move. The man dryly remarked. She just scoffed at her teacher and tossed the dice in the air and let it fall on the sand. As soon as it made contact with the sandy grounds, the man looked over her shoulder with a curious look on his face. The girl looked over the result with a growing grin. Perfect. Edited by Zermeister. Anne, thank you for reading the story, and if you have caught up to the latest chapter, you can check out my other work or join my Discord server, link is in my profile where additional chapters are available, or if you are interested in becoming a beta reader. Proofreading by Toffrel, Visor Nixon, sad_smiles, and Zermeister. 9 comments 0 vote. Chapter 1 Moving forward. Her movements were swift and precise with a certain amount of cat-like grace behind them. Her short, blonde, bob-cut style hair moved along with each strike while her blood-red eyes never left the target. Her lips, which were always twisted in a constant smirk, were plastered on the face of a woman who was seen as both physically and mentally unnatural. This ferocious woman who could instill fear with her maniacal expressions was none other than Clementine, the 9th seed of the Black Scripture. Only a few could ever hope to defeat her in a battle, and most of them were the Black Scripture members. Bordering the realm of heroes, she was at a peak of human abilities. Dressed in an outfit that would be only described as overly daring for even the lowest of women, the two-part plate chest piece barely covered her breasts with only a thin line of black silk underneath giving any sense of decency. The tight high black socks were kept up with suspenders connected to her breastplate. One leg had a tight high plating while the other had one boot. She was wearing black silk shorts that barely covered her private area with a small plate piece covering her crotch and 2 pieces of plate on her tights. Only her arms were decently protected, being fully covered in the plate. She had 2 stilettos in her hand and 2 strapped to the belt while on her back she carried a mace. After all, not all creatures bled and sometimes a blunt force was needed. With swift motion, she spared no time in delivering the fatal blow. Her weapons would always be aiming for the critical weak points, and her unbelievable precision that would garner impressive results were something to surely fear in the perspective of her enemies. Today though would not be her usual day of manslaughter. Instead she was going through her morning practice, hitting wooden targets with her sharp stilettos. The target dummy had already sustained noticeable damage in the shoulder, knee, crotch, and eye areas. No one was practicing near her. One would think men would use every opportunity to either flirt with or ogle at a beautiful woman like her, but her bloodthirsty and sadistic nature was far too known among the soldiers frequenting the scripture training grounds. Even her fellow black scripture members avoided her if they could, being in mutual agreement that Clementine was not the ideal conversational partner. There were few nagging exceptions of course, like the captain of the scripture, whom she noticed approaching from the corner of her eye. The man had long black hair and androgynous features. He was clad in ornate black plate armor with a rather simple spear strapped to his back. With an expression that betrayed his anger, the young man approached his subordinate. Clementine stopped her practice, put the stilettos back in their sheaths, and turned to face him. "Good morning, Captain." She greeted the man with a mock salute, clapping her plate boots together with a clang. "Another good man is dead. You just couldn't stop yourself, could you?" Captain raised his voice, stopping just a meter away from her. "He tried to rape me." Clementine let out a fake sniff to which the captain responded with an unappreciative stare. "And how many times did this excuse of yours actually made sense? Initially I believed you were attacked the first and second time, so there was some leeway I could work with when the cardinals first found out about it. But this is the 7th man this year. When are you going to stop treating this as a game, 9th seat? Why do you worry about those peons anyway? It's not like they can't be replaced. People talk. These aren't just false rumors anymore. I'm well aware of the stories being spread about you leaving widows with small children behind. If we continue to let these stories fester, people will start losing faith in us and subsequently the cardinals as well. Oh, and what are you gonna do about it?" Clementine stepped forward, pressing her body against his. "Bend me over your knee and spank me like a bad girl. A virgin boy like you must be drooling at the idea." Instantly, she was pushed back with the young man's plate-clad hand around her neck. "Oh, you like it rough?" She gasped while reaching for a stiletto. To her surprise, she had only grasped thin air. All 4 of her sheaths were empty. She tried to kick the captain between his legs but he effortlessly blocked her attempt while lifting her off the ground. She may have been a peak human but the captain was a godkin, far exceeding the capabilities of mere humans. "I have had enough of your despicable actions. This is your last warning." Captain spoke while Clementine grabbed at his arm gasping for air. "You will write a full report of your actions and attend a disciplinary hearing. If you fail to do something as simple as that, I will put up a request with cardinals to remove you from the scripture and put you on trial for the murder of all those men. Do I make myself clear, 9th seat?" He squeezed a bit harder, almost breaking her neck. Having seemingly gotten the message through, he let her go at the very last second. Clementine fell to her knees, gasping for air. After a few sharp breaths, she managed to hiss out a few words through her teeth. "Perfectly clear, Captain." As the man walked off the perimeter, she slowly picked up the stilettos from the ground, carefully cleaning them and putting them back in their sheaths. That prick. Why does he have to be such an uptight bastard? It was quite clear that killing guards for her own entertainment was about to be put at an end. The fury displayed on the captain of the Black Scripture made that fact obvious to even someone like her. In the past she would easily be able to get away from severe punishment. Her own methods of handling things during Black Scripture operations were dubious, but nonetheless effective. A slap on her wrist during the hearing was usually the worst of it. Clementine honestly doubted things would not change much. But she began to grow frustrated when she realized that her actions may be monitored from now on. She would be unable to get the chance to toy with hapless victims outside solo missions, which came far too sparingly for her to get her fix. Clementine threw one last glance at Captain before he disappeared from her view. If only I could take that bastard down. I still don't understand why godkins have to be uptight bastards, but life is just unfair, sometimes. She gritted her teeth and kicked the wooden target dummy between its legs with an audible crack, quickly followed by a series of vicious blows to the head. No regular man would survive such an attack, but Clementine liked to imagine the beat-up dummy as the captain, which soothed her anger somewhat. After finishing the pointless assault on the unfeeling wooden figurine, she spat on the ground and looked around with gritted teeth. I need to leave. But they won't just let someone like me walk away. Clearly, a plan was needed. Cold water was just what she needed now to think clearly. Clementine gave the dummy one last punch and walked towards the washing area. The small fenced-off area had a well that always provided fresh cold water, a long stool, and a table with towels, washcloths, and soap. With practiced movements, she got out of her armor and put it in one of the boxes at the entrance. I should better control my anger. Clementine looked at her now bluish fists. I need to pummel someone on my way out like that. Maybe that one guard who can't shut up about his sweetheart. Her mind was fully on the planning, not even registering the coldness of the washcloth on her fair skin. Finding my contact in the Zuranorn cult would be a good place to start. If I could get them to cover my tracks, then there would be no need to worry about getting caught. But what to take? That half-elven bitch won't let me inside the vault for no reason. What else? Oh, that's it. Miko princesses are poorly guarded. I will just snatch the crown and be gone before anyone sounds the alarm. Her face twisted into a sadistic smile. Executing the plan was a piece of cake. With her status, entering the Miko sanctuary was easy. Dispatching a few guards took virtually no effort. The disparity in the power gap was so great that it felt like morning practice all over again. Reaching the chamber of the Miko Princess of the Earth was not difficult either. She had memorized the regular in and out shifts of guards at various times throughout the day. All she needed to do was choose the perfect time where there were not that many guards in the chamber's first line of defense. Not long after her quiet assassinations, Clementine reached the chamber of the Miko Princess of the Earth. Her eyes met with a cute little girl sitting on a bed, who wore a blank expression on her face. Meanwhile, there was a woman in priest's garb who the ninth seed immediately ascertained to be the Miko Princess's caterer. The caterer was immediately alarmed by Clementine's entry. Obviously both sides knew that she had not obtained permission from the cardinals themselves to enter this chamber, so the caterer grabbed a mace from her belt and stood up with a hostile expression on her face. Ninth seed of the Black Scripture, correct? I did not recall you having ever obtained permission to enter these grounds. Until you do, this area is restricted even from you. If you do not exit this place right now, I will have to alert the authorities. Yeah, sorry. I'm in a bit of a rush, you see, so I can't exactly do that complicated stuff like getting permission, Clementine said in a sing-song voice. Her gait turned into a light skip as the caterer could only stare in confusion as to what the ninth seed of the Black Scripture was doing. That doesn't give you any justification for waltzing down herein. With one swift movement, Clementine jammed the stiletto in the woman's left eye. Her words were stopped with an audible gargle, and she briefly looked down to see a blade being shoved deep into where her left eye was. She was unable to process the rest of the events that followed afterwards as her remaining right eye just rolled upwards before her entire body collapsed. The Miko Princess of the Earth didn't react to what was happening around her, and when Clementine approached her, she stared back with the same blank expression as before. What a sad and pathetic existence. Still, you could at least be of some use. You don't mind if I borrow this, little girl? The ninth seed gently took the delicate crown off the girl's head. Adorned with many small jewels, the artifact looked like a golden spider web full of morning dew. The moment the crown was off her head, the girl whimpered, curling up in a fetal-like position. She started to rock back and forth, and Clementine reeled back at what started to smell like urine. Judging by the dark spots around the nether regions of her clothing, she realized that the girl had soiled herself. Having seen this happen on multiple occasions with previous victims, Clementine did not look at this as an abnormal reaction. And whatever pity she had for the Miko princess, it was quickly quashed as her mind immediately shifted into gears. She had no time for being concerned about the girl's fate, now that the authorities would be alerted anytime soon. Clementine quickly departed the chamber, making sure that no one was able to see her caught in the act. Time was of the essence now, and she needed to leave the capital before the cardinals realized what she had done. Despite their high status, the 6 cardinals cleaned the meeting room themselves. This tradition was started long ago with no cardinal having ever suggested canceling this practice. After all, to take the position of a cardinal, second only to Pontifex Maximus, who was the head of the state, meant to show the ultimate servitude to the six great gods. In fact, they didn't even receive a salary and led the lifestyle of simple monks. There was no place for greed and ambitions among the servants of gods. Every nook and cranny was properly dusted, and the candles and the tablecloth were replaced. The lack of natural light inside the room with only a few colored windows made the task only more difficult, but the cardinals were undeterred in their line of work. Cleanliness was always next to godliness, as one of the gods had curtly put it. Once the job was finished, all six took their places. Bernadine, the Cardinal of Fire, was a woman in her 50s with a plump face and a motherly smile. She sat down in her chair and smoothed out the tablecloth in front of her. Not long after, a shriveled old man sat next to the woman, and the both of them exchanged silent greetings. The new person swiftly took his seat and began observing the mood of other cardinals. Zinedine, the Cardinal of Water, was the oldest among his peers. At his advanced age, one may underestimate him based only on his fragile looks. That, of course, would be a terrible mistake. Zinedine took advantage of this seemingly weak display, and would always overpower them with his unrivaled intellect and highly trained deductive skills. His fighting prowess was by no means godly, but learning how to use them while learning about the other opponent was considered a supreme tactic in his perspective. If one were to express more fight in their eyes rather than the sharpened gazes of the Cardinal of Water, then it would be none other than Dominic, the Cardinal of Wind. He was a kindly-looking man, but the former member of Sunlight Scripture could switch from his friendly demeanor to the wrath of a raging wildfire before his unfortunate victim could even blink twice. Going out into the field of battle may not be a common practice for Dominic nowadays, but it would be equally unwise to fight the Cardinal of Earth in a war of words, with the rest of his colleagues having already learned from brutal experience. Raymond, the Cardinal of Earth, was only in his mid-40s and the youngest cardinal at the moment. Despite his youthful energy, he would always display a calm and reasonable demeanor. This quickly earned respect amongst his colleagues, knowing how admirable those traits could be in someone who would oversee the entirety of the theocracy's scriptures. The cardinals also took great heed of the fact that Raymond had once served as a member of the Black Scripture. Being in charge of overseeing all scriptures was more justified for a heavily experienced man such as him. Yvonne, the Cardinal of Light, looked over the room with his usual stern expression and fixed his monocle. As the most by-the-book member of the highest class of clergy, he wasn't casual even among his peers. Maximilian, the Cardinal of Darkness, stood out the most among them. With shoulder-length black hair and round glasses, he had 3 books floating near him. It would be easy to assume that they were religious texts or at least books about magic. In reality, they were composed of not only the modern law of the theocracy, but also written law that dated all the way back to the early days of the theocracy. This was more of a preference to Maximilian, who adored reading ancient text in his spare time. The last to join was Pontifex Maximus himself. As tradition went on, the leader of the nation abandoned their name upon taking the position and was addressed only by the title. The elderly man entered the room and took his seat and announced, "We can start the meeting. I think we should start with the most pressing matter." Raymond started as he handed out the reports. As of now, the entirety of the Sunlight Scripture is considered missing in action. Has the spy working from within Gazep's troop reported back? Pontifex asked. Just like everyone else, he had already heard some bits and pieces, but not the whole analysis of the situation. He started to read the report at a rapid pace while he listened to the cardinals speak. Unfortunately, the spy has not reported back within the expected time frame. He could also not be contacted with an encrypted message spell, which likely points to the possibility that he was killed in action, Raymond said, returning to his seat. But we do agree that the disappearance of the Sunlight Scripture likely is due to them encountering players, Bernadine asked. With her having a close relationship with Relzania, she was the first to get the Thousand Leagues astrologer's report. Therefore the rest of the cardinals took greater heed to Bernadine's words in this situation. Dominic was the first to voice his opinion on the matter, directing his colleagues' attention towards him. They could not have just deserted. And not only an absolutely overwhelming force would be needed to interrupt the operation, but enough to wipe out the whole Sunlight Scripture. This is becoming more insane as it is. I understand where you are going with this, Dominic. And I am well aware of your correspondence with some of the veteran members from the Sunlight Scripture, so do not think I am being so rash to conclusions, Raymond said, diffusing the volatile air emanating from the Cardinal of Wind. I would have to agree, Zinedine spoke up in a calm and reserved tone. Raymond gestured for the Cardinal of Water to continue. You see, my analysis of the battle scene, coupled with the strange interference that prevented astrologer from performing her duties during the battle, has led me to only one logical conclusion. Only a player could have done this. By what battle damage could be observed, it is clear that the Dominion authority was summoned. Zinedine, have you considered other possibilities? Pontifex asked, his tone betraying a hint of worry. A dragon could have been the culprit, but we have no reason to believe the council state would get involved in human affairs. The old man gave a subtle shake of his head. There is simply no benefit for him to do this, and the casualties coming from both sides could be catastrophic. It is too much of a coincidence to dismiss the possibility of the appearance of new players. There are two questions I would like to know if this is true, however. Are these new players belonging to the human race? And would they be interested in cooperation with the theocracy and other human countries? Raymond tapped the table. Naturally, I would prefer for human players to sidle with our own interests, first, Dominic said matter-of-factly. Raymond heard a chorus of approving hums from the other cardinals, seemingly wishing for the same outcome. If I had to guess from what we know, they appeared just as the decoy force attacked the village and decided to punish our forces, since from their point of view, it looked like unjustified slaughter, Zinedine explained. This information brought before us has been indeed helpful. Regardless, throwing hypothetical scenarios back and forth will not bring us closer to our goal. We should continue to observe the situation for now before deciding upon what steps to take. If players indeed have arrived in our world once again, we should see what they do before making official contact. Is there any opposition to my proposal? Pontifex asked. With no one voicing their disagreement, he motioned for Raymond to move on to the next talking point. The next topic that requires immediate attention is the actions of the ninth seed of the Black Scripture, Clementine. The moods of the cardinals soured a little, with Raymond looking somewhat apologetic. Having been a former member of the Black Scripture, he felt pity for its current members, who were most likely dealing with public uproar on Clementine's horrific actions. She was too unstable for her position. All we can blame is our own inaction. I did propose to put her on trial after the second incident. Maximilian remarked. Even a rabid dog has its uses. We all know why we kept her around, yes. There is no point dwelling on it. Yvonne said dryly. We should have kept her on a shorter leash and let her work out her disgusting urges on prisoners. Raymond, I assume you plan to send the Windflower Scripture after her. As much as I hate wasting resources on a deserter, we must retrieve the crown of wisdom at all costs. If not for the uncertain situation with the possible appearance of players, I would have proposed to send a few Black Scripture members after her. With help from astrologer, a team from the Windflower Scripture should be enough to apprehend Clementine and retrieve said artifact. Considering the sensitive nature of her actions and the ninth seat's individual strength, I propose her immediate execution upon capture. I will not allow any more internal transgressions to occur within our own scriptures. The proposal was agreed upon unanimously. A loose cannon like Clementine could not be left on her own, even if she hadn't stolen a priceless artifact. As the cardinals left the room one by one, only Yvonne and Maximilian stayed behind. Since each represented the polar opposites of the gods, one would think that they would get along the least. In actuality, public assumption was the opposite of their true relations. I see something troubles you, my friend. Maximilian started as he observed Yvonne's stony expression. In the long years they knew each other, he grew to know the stoic man all too well. I can't help but worry about the sign the gods showed me during my last pilgrimage to the vault, Yvonne replied hesitantly. If you don't want to speak your mind, that is understandable. All we see is meant for each of us alone cardinals, after all. I was guided towards that chapter. That's, Maximilian's face twisted in concern. It can't be just a coincidence. I hope it is just a manifestation of my worries. Maybe it was a warning to be wary of what sort of players have arrived and be careful. My friend, I saw the ruler of death in my dreams. One that could make even my god tremble. He came to the earth engulfed in light, but brought death wherever he walked. Both fauna and flora were not spared by his heinous aura. I wrote these terrible thoughts off at first as well, but if we both had the same terrible premonition, then I dread to imagine what that could mean for theocracy, or even humanity as a whole. Maximilian put two fingers against his left temple and let out a long sigh. We always knew the possibility existed. We can only pray that it is nothing more than a warning. Those monsters wouldn't have saved humans at first sight, so surely they mustn't be the players that helped Gazef. Yvonne took off his monocle and cleaned it with his handkerchief. But if they are that deceptive, then we have no hope of saving humanity from their evil. I am of the same opinion. Beings as cruel as that would not have saved humans. We can only pray that our gods will guide us through these turbulent times. X. The conference room as of now felt far too big for just 5 players to hold a meeting. An agreement was made to use guest areas of their quarters on a rotation before another smaller conference room was made. Of course, the old one would be preserved as is for the memory sake. By all means, a meeting was needed to be held a few days ago. Due to the unexpected results of his first night with Albedo, however, it was postponed until Ains had gotten enough rest. The rest of the 9th floor would have also gotten a chance to recuperate from the side effects of their union, so in the end the break was solidly justified from the beginning. Today's place of gathering was Ains's quarters. He, as the host, obviously was there already, critically looking over the place. After Pandora's rampage through his living space and subsequent removal of anything he didn't need for personal use, the room looked a lot more spacious. The only new additions were the few items that Albedo had decided to add. His girlfriend had taken a lot of initiative in decorating the space, adding a few dressers for her use and scattering around a noticeable amount of plushies of her making. There also were a few pieces of artwork taken from the treasury. Looks like everything is in order. He let out a relieved sigh. The maid at the door, noticing Ains's agitation, mimicked him and frantically looked for anything that would require her immediate attention. Unlike Ains, she didn't stop stressing about the nitpicky things. She stared at the spacious room as if trying to locate an invisible assassin hiding, ready to strike at a moment's notice. But before she could get a stroke from worrying too much, a knock on the door rescued her. The moment she opened the door, Puro barged in and plopped down on the sofa. "How's it hanging, buddy? Waifu has not killed you yet?" he asked cheerfully. "I'm fine," Ains replied with a cough. So Albedo learned to control both the aura and energy draining. His friend continued his assault. The fact that a skeleton could not get red in the face was his saving grace once again. Partly. "Stop pestering Ains, you perverted bird." Buku interrupted the questioning, arriving before the maid had managed to close the door and sat down next to her brother. "That's rich coming from you, you hypocritical pile of goo. Maybe you should tell Momo how you pestered Albedo for details." Puro raised his voice. "We will talk about this later, snitch." Buku's increasingly lowering voice dragged the room's temperature with it. "Why do both of them have to be like this?" Ains lamented, feeling the emotional suppression doing its blessed work. "Don't worry, boss. At least I don't give a rat's ass what you and your girl do in private." Albert was third to arrive. "We only need to wait for Tabula to arrive and we can start." Ains tried to divert the conversation away from his private life. "Did someone tell him that we are having a meeting?" Buku asked, switching back to her higher pitch voice. "Twice." Albert said, shaking his head. "I swear, we need to assign a babysitter to the guy or he will forget that anything outside of his laboratory exists. Just message him directly and tell him we'll cut his funding if he doesn't drag his ass here right now," Puro suggested. "Good idea." Albert smirked. A moment later, Tabula barged in. "I didn't forget." "Sure you didn't, pal. Maybe we should get you a girl who looks after you." Puro burst into laughter. Wait, but, the brain eater's expression changed to deep confusion. "Tabula, you alright?" Buku immediately picked up that the remark had deeply affected him. Yes. Tabula waved her off and sat down. "Did I have a wife on Earth? Why do I feel like I had someone but can't remember? Something is off. I will have to meditate upon it later." "Buddy, you seem off. Have you inhaled too much of the stuff you are brewing?" Puro dropped the teasing and asked in a much more concerned tone. "No, I'm fine. There is something I need to look into later. Let's just start discussing the official business." "Right. I guess let's start with what we should do with the invitation to appear before the King of Re-Estais. I didn't give a concrete answer when he contacted me, but we should not postpone it further than a month away." Ains said. "I can do it. Or do you want to head towards the location yourself?" Albert said, perking up. "You." Buku raised her brow. "Who wants to bet that it will end up with city walls decorated with people on pikes? Or the city burned down?" Puro chipped in. "I am a refined gentleman. If they piss me off, I'll just curse some items on the way out and leave an army of shadow demons to haunt them." Albert scoffed at the taunts of his friends. "Besides, slow and methodical revenge is more fun. I would much prefer those elitist shits to watch their world crumble around them before putting them on pikes. Are you sure you can remain calm if they start to make unreasonable claims? If Carne is any indication how things are in this kingdom, I doubt we'll get as much as thanks for saving Gazef and the town." Ains glanced at the demon. Albert, after all, was embracing his new self the fastest, and discarded any human morals the first chance he got. "I can follow the script just fine, thank you. I'll go be my charming self, get a better look at the nation's elite, and then we work from there." Who knows, maybe we can tear the whole country apart from within and show up as saviors afterward. Albert smirked. I'm sure there will be at least a few willing to sell their own people for some bloodied coins. I guess you can take this one. I think I need a lot more practice before I can put up a convincing show. Ains agreed to let Albert take charge for now. Oh, don't sell yourself short. When you don't overthink things, you are a natural leader. Look how good Carne went. Buku reminded him. Yes. What's next? Oh, we do need to think about how we will set up a government. According to Oriol's observation, the forest near Carne does not seem to have any strong creatures, but there are a lot of semi-intelligent ogre and goblin tribes. We could start building our empire there and practice how to run it. Demiurge already had drawn a plan on how to proceed. Obviously I scratched out some of his more extreme ideas, Albert added. Both had discussed the idea the day before, mostly because Demiurge was far too eager to show off to his father and was drawing up various plans non-stop. Sure, why not? Starting with non-humans is a good idea. Sis and I wanted to go explore a bit. Pose as adventurers maybe. See how things are from the ground up, so to speak. Puro instantly steered the conversation in the direction he wanted. We can set up our branches right away and then take a few weeks off, right? I mean, it's not like we need a ready-to-go army and assassin squads right away. Both siblings tried to sell the idea of them just going on an adventure. That does sound interesting. Ains stroked his chin, keeping his excitement at the idea just below the suppression point. I could join. Not a fucking chance. Albert rudely interrupted his daydreaming. You are not running off and leaving me in charge. But, Ains tried to weakly protest. You are the ruler of the freaking Nazarick. You can't go on an adventure just like that. Remember that you sure as hell can't leave without your girlfriend, and without her, the whole tomb will fall apart. But, Ains let out a frustrated sigh and looked down. You are right. Don't be sad, buddy. I'm sure Albedo will make up for it. You are a taken man now. Puro got up and patted his shoulder. How about we promise to let just you two have a vacation once things are set up? Puro and I don't plan to be gone for long. Buku flashed him a reassuring smile. Was there a reason for me to even attend this? Tabula asked impatiently. You can torment those scripture members later. Or make some weird alchemical shit that gives you purple zits on your ass. Albert shot back. I am doing important work and... Tabula, Albert, pointless bickering will lead us nowhere. I would not mind both of you presenting valid arguments, but I can see where this is going, and frankly none of us here have any time for that. Ains raised his voice to establish himself as the new speaker. Without realizing it right away, he accidentally channeled some of his energy into his voice, making the rest of his friends shudder. The Brain Eater and the Demon stared at him, startled, with Ains surprising himself as well. Did those words come to me as a reflex? Whatever the case, I got these two to finally quiet down. Maybe I should rely on my Overlord side more. Seeing that no one wanted to talk right now, Ains took back the reins of the conversation. He ignored Puro and Buku, letting out synchronized whistles as he began speaking. If you are in such a hurry, then tell me what you need from outside Nazarick and be on your way, Ains said, putting his full attention towards Tabula. Sure. Tabula scratched the back of his head with one of his tentacles. I could use a local magician and alchemist to get a better insight into how things are done in the world we are in. We'll look out for one. Puro immediately responded. Great. Notify me if something important requires my attention. Tabula said, and before anyone could get a word in, teleported away. We need to get him a secretary post-haste. I don't want to organize his day for him, especially if he is supposed to actually be in charge of the science branch. Albert remarked. Agreed. But for now, we can let Tabula be. I'm sure his research will be beneficial for Nazarick. Ains added in. I'll just send a couple of succubi to watch after him. I plan to test the limits of demon summoning anyway. Are you sure it is safe to summon demons en masse? Ains asked, glancing around. No, wait, they're not being used for what I think they're being used for. Are they? By the apologetic reactions of the siblings, it was clear that everyone, save for Ains, was all for filling up the tomb with lust-oriented demons. Should be. Imps were just as loyal as naturally spawning ones. It's not like they could be of any threat to us. At best, they could reach level 50, so even hundreds combined shouldn't be able to repeat the stunt you and Albedo did. Albert grinned at the undead, knowing he just cornered his friend. The crimson lights in Ains's eyes disappeared momentarily before returning back with full force. He responded in as neutral of a voice as he could muster. Carry on then. The meeting was concluded and each had the next steps to take. Ains watched his friends depart one by one and the maids and guards return to the room as they had left the moment players started to converse. While the Supreme Beings held their meeting, the tomb's guardians had gathered for their own talk. Albedo, as one with quarters designed for a Supreme Being, had invited the rest. Her living space was almost unused since she spent nights in Ains's bed. In addition, most of her day-to-day clothing had found its place in her lover's quarters. Simply put, her own place was so infrequent that present circumstances made it better for her own quarters to be used as a gathering place for the most important servants of Nazareth. As to not waste anyone's precious time, all of them arrived within a few minutes of one another. Demiurge and Pandora took seats next to Albedo while Aura, Mare, Shaltir, and Oriole sat down opposite them. Cocytus and Sebas took smaller seats at each end of the sofas. The last two present were Negredo and Rubedo, both choosing to stand. Gargantua was not included for rather obvious reasons and Victim chose to not participate. While there was general friendliness among the group, Demiurge and Sebas glanced at each other with some animosity due to the imprint of their creators being at each other's throats constantly. Shaltir and Albedo showed somewhat more civility, but the situation was not really better compared to the sharply dressed butler and devil. The vampire glared at Albedo with such intensity that it seemed she was attempting to set the succubus on fire. Shaltir. If you have something to say, now would be the best time, Albedo said, smirking at her. The succubus was well aware that both her and Shaltir were gunning to be Ains's bride. It was a little disappointing for Albedo to find out that she was only being referred to as a girlfriend, but it was nonetheless a humongous step in the right direction. In the end, she was a clear victor in the competition for Ains, and Shaltir knew that very well. I have nothing to say to you. Lord Ains will soon realize he has made a mistake and see how past you are in your prime, gorilla. It seems you are implying Lord Ains makes mistakes, Shaltir, Demiurge intervened, sounding more inquisitive than upset. The fiery competition between Shaltir and Albedo was something that Demiurge did not really care about other than the outcome of potential heirs he could one day serve. But he disliked the possibility of the vampire badmouthing the Supreme One's decisions, so Demiurge could not help himself but sound slightly annoyed. Shaltir must have realized it too, feeling the change in the room's atmosphere. She clutched her mouth and whimpered in horror. I didn't mean it like that. Albedo glanced at the archdemon with a raised eyebrow. A figurative light bulb then appeared above her head, and the succubus faced the frightened vampire, deciding to do the final blow to her fragile psyche. Now, Demiurge. There is no need to point fingers. I'm sure Shaltir misspoke and actually thinks Lord Ains made a mistake by choosing me. Seeing how masterfully Albedo won the war of words, she just sunk down into the couch and let out a low growl. This is why I hate getting into arguments. Let's just get on with whatever you want to talk about. I want to make another patrol round before the day ends. Of course. The reason I asked all of you to come today is for all of us to understand the goals of our creators, even those who are still absent. Albedo quickly switched to a businesslike demeanor as the words were already exiting her mouth before even giving herself a chance to think about them. I already discussed the topic with Demiurge, but in short, it seems the Supreme Beings have chosen the highly popular strategy to convert humans and other lesser beings into worshippers and build their empire with this fact in mind. We have already discussed this possibility beforehand, and Carne Village was chosen to be the first test ground to see how this worship could be implemented among humans. Oh yeah. Mom told us something similar when I asked how things went in that human village. If they do worship the Supreme Ones, I guess we can tolerate them. Aura chipped in, garnering approving nods from the other floor guardians. It is only natural that every living creature should worship them. But the fact remains that humans were once the enemies of the Supreme Ones. How are we to convert them to our beliefs without causing massive friction? Cocytus asked with a puff of cold air filling the room. Not everyone should or could be convinced, of course. As my father explained, we should look at every sentient creature outside of Nazareth as though they were a blade of wheat in a massive field. Our job is to nurture the field for the Supreme Ones to harvest their adoration. All the ones that are not useful should be weeded out and used for other purposes. Demiurge explained with his usual half-smirk decorating his face. So we kill everyone who doesn't fall in line. Starting with those pathetic humans the Supreme Ones so graciously saved. Shaltir asked as she sat up. If I can prove I am better than that old hag, maybe Lord Ains will change his mind. I should ask Daddy for advice. There were only a few dozen of them. The killing of the first test subjects would serve no purpose. Pandora said and stood up, swinging his hand sideways, imitating his father. I propose a careful observation under a supervisor from Nazareth. Ein Hund kann nicht nur durch negative Konditionierung trainiert werden. I am assuming that you are proposing to use mostly positive reinforcement. This dog analogy is something we could strive for. A well-trained dog would obey its master's every command and do so with utmost adoration. I would put those creatures closer to farm animals, but if such an approach works, then we can at least try it out. I think I could send one of the Pleiades to observe the village under the guise of a protector. Albedo nodded in agreement with the proposal. If my beloved Lord Ains wants to protect those pathetic creatures and turn them into worshippers, then it is my utmost duty to carry out his will. It's interesting how similar Pandora's thought process is to his father's. Maybe I should interact with him more often despite his eccentricities. I'm sure Lord Ains added those traits for a reason. You can't send Lupus. Da father has claimed her. Shaltir announced. Maybe Yuri. Big sis is kindest among my sisters. Oriole spoke up in a soft, barely audible voice. An excellent suggestion, Oriole. Yuri's undead nature would be helpful to observe human behavior with a passive detachment. Demiurge flashed the shy girl a smile. It was becoming clear to him that the Pleiade maid was uncomfortable being in a room filled with most of the floor guardians. Then it's settled. I'll send Yuri to observe Carne Village. Albedo nodded, noticing Oriole's discomfort as well. If no one else has anything to add, you may return to your posts. The guardians left the room one by one, with only Pandora staying behind. Once he and Albedo were alone in the room, he spoke up. I have an issue I would like to clarify with you. Oh. Considering your relationship with father, how should I address you from now on? Pandora spoke in a much more neutral voice. I fail to understand where are you going with this, Albedo said, genuinely confused. Knowing my creator, he would likely make you his wife sooner than later. Should I address you as Stiefmutter? Stiefmutter. If I recall correctly, that must mean stepmo, Albedo muttered, trying to process what she just got asked. Her eyes popped up in surprise at the implications. Are you out of your mind? Even if Lord Momonga weds me, you should never call me that. Verstanden. Pandora saluted. Lady Albedo it is. He promptly marched out, leaving Albedo on her own. However, the succubus's fury subsided the moment she was alone. Her mind did a complete 180, and she was back to her dazed thoughts involving her and a certain undead. Wed me soon. Could it be that my beloved Ains plans to marry me and me alone and has told his plans to his son? With a smile plastered on her face, she took out a brand new notebook from her inventory and wrote on its cover, Wedding Plan. Bonus story, reasons for their happiness. A blonde boy repeated the same sword swing again and again. His arms were shaking. The overstrained muscles screamed in agony, begging him to stop the training, but he went on without mercy toward his own body. He needed to push beyond his limits to repay the kindness his mistress had shown him. He wasn't of noble blood and by all means shouldn't be anywhere near the kind princess that rescued him years ago. As a street urchin, he had lived in an abandoned house living off whatever scraps he could find and steal. And just as his life hit the lowest point with him laying in the side street, close to death by starvation, this angel approached him. Princess Renner took him in and gave him a place to stay and a purpose. He became her most stalwart guardian. Her radiant smile never left the back of his mind, even during his rigorous training sessions. After a few more swings, his hands shook so much that he had to stop. Climb put away the training sword and wiped off the sweat off his youthful determined face. The walk through the castle went as usual, the stares filled with disdain, the whispers they thought he couldn't hear. Unlike him, even the lowest of servants in the royal castle was of noble blood. The third and fourth daughters of nobles worked as maids while the youngest sons served as manservants, butlers and royal guards. They despised him for where he came from. But it didn't matter to someone like Climb. As long as he could be at his mistress' side, he could withstand any ridicule. Somewhere deep within, however, he knew that this happiness would not last. Sooner or later, the princess would be married off in typical royal fashion. He likely would be pushed away from her, becoming an outcast in society once again. Returning to his small room in the servant area, he quickly wiped himself with a washcloth and put on the white armor he had spent hours polishing to a shine. In her infinite kindness, Princess had gotten an armor set from her close friend and gifted it to him. With all adjustments done, he grabbed a small hand mirror and looked at his reflection for any flaws. His blue eyes scanned every part of the armor critically. Satisfied with the result, Climb rushed off to Princess's quarters. Once he entered the main area with a knock and an invite from his mistress to enter, his gaze once again fell on the princess, who looked at him with a tilt of her head and then pouted. You trained too hard again. Climb, you can't push yourself like this. Even with a pout, she was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. In fact, most of the kingdom considered her beauty unmatched by any other woman. With long golden hair and vibrant dark blue eyes that radiated warmth, she was dressed in a long light blue dress that accentuated her beauty even more. On head she wore a small crown. Sorry, Your Royal Highness. Klim bowed deeply. She always knows. Climb, you know you don't have to use those honorifics when it's just the two of us. She flashed him the same radiant smile. The young man's heart skipped a beat and he nervously nodded. No matter how often they spent time together, he couldn't oblige her request and be more casual around her. Especially of late when his teenage body reacted to her presence a lot more than before. It was only her he could think about in his private time. Renner approached him and inspected his shining plate armor critically. She leaned closer in and polished a spot on his chest with the boy freezing up like a statue. Even though he was rather short for his age, he was still marginally taller than the princess, making her lean down a bit as she inspected her handiwork. There. Flawless. She remarked. When the boy could only nod in silence, she broke into a bit more mischievous smile. Come sit with me. Renner motioned for the boy to join her at the small table. He is looking at me with those eyes again. My puppy gets so excited. You can't hide it from me, my dear Climb. Her bodyguard exhaled sharply and approached the table with wooden movements. He looked around nervously and then sat down. Renner clamped her legs together and exhaled just as sharply. With an unchanging expression, she poured a cup of tea for him. One day you will be mine. Oh, I can't wait for it already. I know you will be my first and only. I will have you, no matter what. I will burn this damn kingdom to the ground for us. Just a bit more time. Everything must be set just right. In the excitement, her mask almost slipped. He could not know her true self. Renner knew he would not understand that this facade of kindness was created just for him. In truth, he was the only one she cared about. Born smarter than anyone around her, she found herself alienated from an early age as even the so-called educated nobles wrote off her ideas as just ramblings of a curious child. This alienation combined with the general neglect from her parents and siblings that came with being a royal shaped her into someone who couldn't connect with others and saw people as mere tools to be exploited for her own gains. That is until she found an orphan boy that saw her as a savior. It was his big loving eyes, his puppy stare that gave her something to look forward to. A day when they could be together. His love for her was undeniable. Especially of late when he was rapidly growing into manhood. Obviously, as a princess, she could not dress more provocatively to excite Climb with her body, but there were other ways to achieve the same result. A smile at the right time, a compliment. A light, accidental, touch was enough to assure she was the only girl her puppy ever thought about. One day you will be mine and nothing in this world will stop me from having you. She returned his loving gaze and brought the teacup to her lips, taking a small sip. Edited by Zermeister. Proofreading by Visor Nixon, Toffrel, Detract, Sad_Smiles, Swiss Chocolatus, and Alessandro. Anne, thank you for reading the story, and if you have caught up to the latest chapter, you can check out my other work or join my Discord server, link is in my profile where additional chapters are available or if you are interested in becoming a beta reader. 3 comments 0 vote. Chapter 2 Recruits. Before she could go for a fun adventure, some sort of hierarchy in Nazarik's upcoming army needed to be established. The problem was that Buku didn't know anything about the military, tactics, or warfare in general. Back in her dungeon diving days with Ainsul Gaon, Buku fretted about having groups be placed under her own leadership. She felt her own fighting ideals were much more closely aligned with that of her best friend Yamaiko, in which the both of them preferred punching the enemies before thinking. Meanwhile, things that closely resembled complex strategizing were usually left to the two guildmates, Punidomo and Ancient One. Buku felt no shame in leaving others to handle these kinds of things. Since she could not contribute that much to the guild when it came to strategizing, she had gone for the second best thing. Praising them for their hard work in the form of heartwarming and flirtatious comments. It was a small hobby of hers she loved doing as it usually made the two serious strategists extremely embarrassed by the compliments. When she asked Momonga about military strategies via an offhand remark of hers in one of their conversations, the undead agreed with Buku's sentiments. At the very least, she found it somewhat relieving that the guildmaster was anxious about getting into the meat of the matter. Both did reluctantly agree, however, that the idea of creating a sophisticated military was steadily becoming more important as each day had passed. Nervously chewing gum, she sat on the small throne in the military headquarters that was recently added to the Great Tomb by Albedo. There were 12 chairs around the table, that would be filled over time when her inner circle would be established. The rest of the room was decorated with a massive flag of Nazareth on the opposite wall and her personal flag on the wall behind her. The layout was planned by Demiurge and subsequently approved by Momonga. Buku did not do more than raise a few questions, but otherwise gave approval to the cunning demon's plans along with the rest of her friends. A few changes were implemented by Puro and Albert, both of whom knew a thing or two about the very thing she now claimed to be the goddess of. While Buku was a bit thankful that her demon friend offered her some pointers, her brother kept circling around his own self-proclaimed advice to the point where she wanted to strangle him for his needless words. In front of her was a large round table with the replication of the map Ains got from the village chief. For now, it was all the intel they had on the world. It was lacking, but understandable as Albert's intelligence department was still in its infancy. It would take some time before the department was filled to the brim with suitable workers, allowing for more reliable information to be gathered. A few more minutes and they will be here. What should I do? She pulled the gum out of her mouth and glued it under the table. Her maid of the day tilted her head to observe Buku's actions with a faint smile. I can't bullshit around. They will catch on far too fast. Buku continued to nervously shift around on the throne while fighting with the wrapping of the gum. The ones she had gotten from the candy shop came with all kinds of sweet fruity flavors, unlike the cheap chewing gum back on Earth that was either mint or some synthetic sickly sweet imitations of fruits. I should have boozed up for this. Fuck it, I'll just be honest with them. It's not like they are going to murder me, probably. Buku finally defeated the wrapping and popped another piece of gum into her mouth. She leaned sideways and rested her right arm on the throne's armrest while chewing on the delicious treat. It didn't take long for Demiurge to show up with a thick folder in his hands, followed by Cocytus. You two are finally here, Buku said, perking up at the new arrivals. There's no need to be at the ceremony, if that's the right word for it. Just sit down so we can start right away. Straight to the point. I understand, Lady Buku. Acquiescing to Buku's gentle demand, Demiurge opted to greet her with a light bow with minimal wording. He quickly sat down to her left, letting his spiked tail curl around one of his chair legs. Cocytus bowed deeply without saying a word and went to a seat located to her right. The maid left the room, closing the door behind her. The two floor guardians stared at Buku, giving her stares of glowering expectation. All right. I feel really pressured right now. Just handle it like Momo would. Awkwardly clearing her throat, Buku began her presentation, but not before silently thanking the undead who accepted her early request for a practiced rehearsal. So, here is the deal. I accepted the role of Grand Marshal and was granted the title of the Goddess of War through the ritual tabula performed, but to be honest, I know little about the art of war. I know this might seem baffling to you, but that does not mean I will be complacent and lack in the duties that I accepted for myself. That being the case, I will rely on you both at first to bring me up to speed. Buku chose to use her normal speaking tone, unlike the playful high-pitched tone she used in casual conversations. The former had much more weight to it. Of course. And there is no need for you to lower yourself, Lady Buku. Lord Momonga has granted my feeble mind the sacred knowledge that, which I had come to reluctantly accept, even the Supreme Being needs a sliver of assistance. Actually, I need a lot of assistance, but I don't want to say that to Demiurge straight in the face. Buku screamed to herself. She kept on a tight-lipped smile and merely nodded in acknowledgement. Nonetheless, Father informed me that I should prepare introductory material. What I can be most sure of is that you and the rest of the Supreme Beings treat these so-called flaws as little speed bumps. I will be frank with you, Lady Buku. I have no doubt you will surpass our expertise in no time, Demiurge said with a revered voice. He placed the massive folder on the table, and he misinterpreted Buku's twitching eyes as a form of giddy excitement at wanting to see what lay inside those hundreds of pages worth of material. It's a great honor to tutor a supreme being like you, Lady Buku. Cocytus nodded in agreement. Great. Where do we start then? Buku asked with a sigh of relief. She snuck a couple of glares at the hefty binder now placed in front of her. While that looks absolutely horrifying, I'm glad they aren't belittling me for my lack of knowledge about military stuff. At least I don't have to bullshit my way through this, it seems. Back then, her mind would have been wrought with anxiety and doubt at having to learn all of this in so little time. That dreadful sensation was no longer here, and it was now replaced with a strangely newfound confidence. From deep within herself, Buku felt that she was born for this role as soon as she received it. That odd feeling had surfaced once again, so she was feeling a bit eager to hear what Demiurge has to say in this field. First would be to establish proper hierarchy, Demiurge explained, fixing his glasses. I would gladly take a role within your ranks, but my duty to assist Father would prevent me from devoting my full attention to serving you. I hope you don't mind, Lady Buku, but unless father says otherwise, I will only offer myself as an advisor. That's all right. If I am not mistaken, it would be Cocytus who would be better suited to be my second in command. Are you ready to take the role of Vice Marshal of Nazarick? Buku turned to the addressed floor guardian. The stoic insectoid pushed back the chair and kneeled before Buku. I will accept this duty with utmost respect, Lady Buku. Look, guys, you don't have to kneel and bow at every opportunity. I prefer if we kept things casual. Leave that formal stuff for grunts and maybe for official events, okay? Buku said, casually gluing another gum under the table. Reluctantly, Cocytus returned to his seat. I will try my best, Lady Buku, but showing proper respect to you as a supreme being feels natural, especially now that your divinity shines through. I will have to agree with Cocytus. It seems that the ritual you and the other supreme beings have performed has added an intangible divine glow. I have a hard time restraining myself around father and keeping up with his wishes to be casual, Demiurge said, adding to his colleague's words. You are like our children. That alone should give you special privileges. Maybe you can think of me as your aunt like Shaltir does. We are in this together, divinity or not, Buku replied, raising her pitch. We can use the rank outside the tomb when other people are around, but here at our home, try to be at ease. Seeing that her words had little effect on the two floor guardians, Buku let out an exasperated sigh. She had to wave her hand when Demiurge and Cocytus were about to launch into an apologetic tirade, seemingly interpreting her sigh as a form of disappointment. So much for trying to loosen them up. Let's move on then. Can I ask you two to assign the rest of the military leadership? Ains is planning to take a look at the Great Forest of Tob, and while he's off doing that, I thought it would be nice to at least get some exercises on locals to have some semblance of being battle-ready. Assuming that other floor and area guardians will be assigned to serve under the rest of the supreme beings more directly, I could assign some of my evil lords under your command and prioritize their military duties. Wrath in particular would be an excellent field commander. All my subordinates are yours to command, Lady Buku. With your permission, I will request Shaltir to have access to the undead spawning on the first 3 floors. The pop monsters should provide numbers necessary to create the first legions. That's a great idea. You have my permission, and if she causes problems, tell me immediately. I know my niece can be a handful, especially now that she has lost to albedo. Buku replied, flashing the icy insectoid with a smile. The first steps were taken with noticeable success on Buku's end. It did irk her that she now had to read through a massive instructional manual prepared by Demiurge, but she eventually surrendered her rebellious thoughts. She told herself that this would be worth it in the long run, which was able to drive her motivation up for some time. Despite having immense power to himself and the newly given potential to grow even more, Albert still had to concede to the fact that summoning was a rather tricky and fickle business. Without suitable bodies as a tribute, each summon took about 20 times as much mana to have a permanent body created. And even then the few human corpses they got from the killed scripture members disintegrated when Albert tried to summon a high-tier demon. With that in mind, performing mass demon summoning was even trickier. Calculations needed to be correct. Otherwise, he would run out of mana, pass out, and get no results. Luckily, the margin of error for summoning succubi and incubi was rather forgiving since at best they could reach level 50 and on average were only about level 30. Since his new line of work was to gather intelligence, these types of demons were more suited for the field work. First, they knew human desires and could use them against their targets. Secondly, their, although limited, shapeshifting abilities made them perfect for infiltration. Albert did not forget to remember that both Puro and Buku had been pestering him for when they would get their new toys. Not wanting to be slighted, he had ended up making a deal with them, and making the pervert siblings indebted to him surely didn't hurt in the long run. Overall, Albert hoped to summon about 40 of them and not fall below the 20% mark of his mana reserves. And if the first summoning worked as intended, he could add more types of demons to his agent list. For this purpose, he had chosen a paved patch near the ruined church on the 7th level of Nazarick. Drawing in the scorching air in his lungs, he did the mental calculations one last time. Demiurge and the 7 evil lords stood behind him, ready to act if something went horribly wrong. Be ready. Let's see how it goes, Albert announced. Upon hearing loud affirmations behind him, he started to cast a spell that he had tweaked for this sole purpose. Tabula was not the only one who could do experimentation, and Albert felt he himself should indulge in this field given his own new powers. As the one who got the title of the demon god, summoning demons came as easy as breathing and he instinctively knew what would be called to serve him. The 8 figures behind him tensed up at the rapidly growing mana in front of their master. While Demiurge stood with the same calm demeanor, some of the more anxious evil lords began preparing weapons just in case. Albert kneeled down and touched the ground as a massive summoning circle spread out. His mana started to drain at a rapid pace as black bile started to form humanoid figures. One by one, they took shapes growing skin and clothing, some elegant, some so daring it couldn't be called clothing. Not even a minute later, 40 figures stood in orderly rows. Albert stood up and glanced over his handiwork. All of the demons were extraordinarily good-looking with a common trait of having horns, spiked tails, and leathery wings. But that was where the commonalities stopped. The horn styles widely differed from demon to demon, the same as hairstyle and eye color. Some had predatory eyes with vertical slits while others looked back at him with human eyes. One figure had managed to catch Albert's attention. A woman who looked tailor-made to his preferences as he began to appraise her up close. Tall and elegant with a curvy figure that was clad in a long silk dress showing just enough cleavage to get attention but not to look vulgar. Her green eyes looked back at him with a knowing glee, her long blonde hair covered her bare shoulders giving her an appearance of a born noble. She is the most powerful of the group. Level 47, I think. She is the only one with 4 horns. My, looks like someone came up with a plan to seduce me. Such an interesting game awaits us. Albert flashed her a smile. The demoness curved her lips upward, and after a small tilt of her head, was first to kneel. One by one, the rest of her peers followed suit, with only one remaining standing. This unusual behavior amused Albert, but it seemed that this sentiment was not shared by the growling demons behind him. The standing demoness, oblivious to the hateful stares towards her, looked around with a sigh of relief and whispered to herself. I must have reached the right place. This looks familiar. The summoner, Albert, yes, he was from the guild. If I recall correctly. He must be somewhere near. The 4-horned demoness quietly hissed. Kneel, you fool. Before the other demoness could follow her command, Demiurge was already in front of her with a wrathful expression. There were even veins that began to angrily pulse on his forehead. A lowly demon like you dares to not show respect to Lord Albert. Before Albert could stop his son, Demiurge had smacked the demoness making her fall to the ground. The evil lords changed their expressions, shifting to sadistic delight upon seeing the rebellious demoness lose her footing in no time flat. When it came to manners, Demiurge usually was on top of his game. That all flew right out of the window the moment he saw something he deemed to be disrespectful towards the creator. 4 of the captured humans died by his hand for that exact reason, a grim fact that Albert had eventually learned when such report reached him after the interrogation with the former sunlight scripture was completed. The demoness seemed to instantly realize her mistake. She prostrated on the scorching hot stone, feeling more preoccupied with the pain of the slap rather than the agonizing temperature of the floor her face was now in direct contact with. I'm sorry for not kneeling sooner. Please forgive me. There is no such thing as forgiveness when it comes to. Demiurge, calm down. Let's get to the bottom of this. Doesn't she remind you of someone? Albert intervened. Even at first glance, the offending demoness had a striking resemblance to Albedo. Same facial features, the same yellow cat-like eyes, and long black hair. Only this one looked a tad more mature than her counterpart. While the guardian overseer roughly looked to be in her early 20s, this summoned succubus looked to be in her early to mid-30s by human standards. She even dressed similarly to her counterpart. The tight, long low-cut dress was as elegant as it was provocative. Demiurge realized with unnatural speed as to what his father was implying to. He straightened his posture with a conflicted look on his face, bordering between vile hatred for what the demoness had done earlier and understanding after giving second thoughts. I apologize for my earlier actions, father. Still, I couldn't tolerate such disrespect towards you from a low-tier demon. Demiurge turned around and bowed, to which Albert had to physically straighten him up after an awkward minute of continuous bowing. I know, but we can deal with it in a calm manner. If you weren't so hasty, you would have noticed that she looks exactly like Albedo. There must be some reason for her actions and appearance. Albert decided to speak in a calmer tone so as to not startle his son, who would no doubt treat each scolding like a death sentence. Oh, of course. I will do better, father. Demiurge replied with all the anger in his tone replaced by a mix of fear and anxiety. Lord, I humbly request permission to speak. Both Albert and Demiurge turned their heads towards the 4-horned demoness who was still kneeling with her head lowered. Permission granted, you all can rise, Albert said and motioned for the demoness to approach him. She got up with a fluid, graceful motion and walked towards Albert, swinging her hips in a sultry manner. Calm thoughts, man. That one will be a handful. Albert watched her approach with a raised eyebrow. The fact that his now demonic body only enchanted his emotions and desires did not help the state of things, nor did it do anything else but increase his libido. But for someone like him who had known nothing but struggle all his life, it only invited the challenge to remain on the top of his game. Albert also made it a personal goal of his to not become a sex-crazed maniac that he guessed Puro would go down the path of soon enough. The demoness stopped right before him, giving a light bow before speaking with barely hidden seduction. "Forgive me, my lord, but the young one meant no disrespect. She is seeking her husband, whom you might be acquainted with." "Is that so? I doubt anyone from Nazareth is married to a succubus, but let's hear the name of her husband from her own mouth, shall we?" Albert turned his attention to the shivering demoness with a cheek that started to swell up and turn bluish. As for Demiurge, who at least had enough self-control to not kill the demoness on the spot, he could only watch with bated breath at seeing his father personally take control of the situation. "I wonder, though. Does she really want to make an impression that she is married to one of us? None of us even knew." And then it clicked. The fact she looked just like Albedo was not to deceive him, but likely served as an inspiration. Albert would have not understood his own thoughts back then, but Tabula's previous rants started to shed light on the plausible connections between this demoness and his friend's creation. The demoness nervously shifted around and closed her eyes, as if expecting to get killed for what she was about to say. With a nervous gulp, she uttered the words Albert expected her to say. "I am married to Tabula Smaragdina. Father, is she really implying?" Demiurge's voice betrayed his anger at the outrageous claim. Before he could even finish the sentence, Albert cut him off. "Yes, and I do not think she is lying. Let's hear from the man himself if it is the truth or not." "Hey, Tabula, I have great news, but you have to promise to not be mad about how we handled things." Albert spoke like a salesman of used cars. "Why would I be mad about the good news? Did you get me a local alchemist?" "No, I think I just summoned your wife, or at least someone you would know." "Wife? I don't, wait. Mari." The brain eater appeared next to Albert and charged toward the succubus. "Mari." The next moment, he was holding her in his long slithery hands. The succubus started to sob in his embrace. "I thought I lost you. After all this time, I..." "Don't worry, I am here. I am so sorry, can we talk in private?" "I have a lot to apologize for," Tabula spoke back, sounding much more melodramatic than Albert initially expected. "Yes, please. I would very much like that," Mari whispered back, slowly regaining her composure. Once they pulled out of each other's embrace, Tabula became aware of the state of her face. He gently touched her bruised cheek, which was slowly losing the bluish tint and swollenness, and then asked in his deep guttural voice that was directed towards a confused Albert. "What did you do to her?" "No. The fault is all mine, Lord Tabula. Please do not blame father for my rash actions." Demiurge was on one knee behind his father, understandably fearful of his own life after hearing Tabula's outraged voice. "You." Tabula flipped around, turning away from Mari and walked towards Demiurge, ignoring Albert who stood in front of the kneeling floor guardian. But before he could inflict some sort of punishment on the floor guardian that had struck his wife, Mariposa touched her husband's shoulder and spoke in a soft voice. "I'm fine, let's just go." "But I was at fault. Tabula, please, let's just go." "All right. Have fun. And sorry about the not so nice reception. I owe you both." Albert waved them off as Tabula teleported away with his wife. After confirming that they were both gone, he looked up and let out a tired sigh. "Now, where were we?" Albert turned his attention back to the remaining 39. "Right, I will pick a few as my personal attendants and a few of my friends will want to do the same. If you oppose their decisions, speak up immediately and I will permit you to choose other roles. I assure you none will mind. To be chosen by the gods is an honor." The four-horned succubus spoke up again. "We all know who you are aiming for," Albert remarked. "What's your name?" "Flornohe, my lord. I would be honored to be picked by you." She bowed with a subtle smile on her face. "I'll just let you explain yourself so there are no misunderstandings." Albert's smile faded as his tone grew more menacing. "It's simple. Every demon you summoned today is my confidant. I am not as naive to think I could outsmart the god of trickery in any way. The form I choose is merely for your enjoyment." Her tone showed no sign of fear. Florohe took a step closer with a charming smile and continued. "My initial goal was to see where Mariposa, your peer's beloved wife, was planning to go, and I gathered all the relevant information beforehand as anyone in my position would. I will serve you with unwavering loyalty as long as you deem necessary, and I'm sure you'll find a reliable and experienced assistant in me. The ones I brought with me will obviously be absolutely loyal to you and listen to my orders only if they do not contradict yours." Albert gently stroked her cheek with the back of his hand. Interesting. I will take you for myself and let you serve as an assistant when it comes to all succubi and incubi in my service. But if I, so much as, suspect duplicity from you, getting dismissed will be the least of your concerns. She seems confident. I wonder how old she is. Tabula did say some of them are tens of thousands of years old. Flournoy seems to be at least a rank above the rest. I'll have to keep her on a short leash, otherwise, she'll be able to wrap me around her finger. Albert mused. Even with all the suspicions, it was far better to keep her close and watch all she does carefully. Of course. I wouldn't expect anything else. I hope my lord will rely on my expertise on how to best utilize my kind. She leaned in his hand, parting her lips and letting out a long exhale. I definitely have to learn a covert mind-reading spell. Albert put a mental note to hit the library later and sent a message to Puro and Buku to come and do their pickings. Since you know my preferences so well, I leave it to you to pick who else should attend to my needs, Albert said as the siblings showed up beside him. Puro predictably picked 3 slim succubi that barely had any curves. Buku, meanwhile, picked 5 incubi with slim builds and soft, androgynous faces. The remaining ones were assigned to help out Demiurge with the intelligence network until further orders were given. The moment Tabula and Mariposa appeared in his quarters, he sent out all the servants to have a moment of privacy. She pushed away from him and with her back turned to her husband stood with her arms crossed. Mari, Tabula stumbled upon his words. No matter what explanation he would try to give, he now needed to somehow explain to his wife that he had forgotten about her. What happens with us now? She asked, her voice barely audible. You are here, everything is all right now. Tabula touched her shoulder. Is it? Are you even the same person as you were the week before? This place is artificial, created and manipulated by powers neither me nor you understand. That demon was less than a month old but had power equal to the highest of demons. Tabula squeezed her shoulder gently, stopping her shuddering movements. Mari, I am me. The form may be different, but I still feel the same for you. Great Mother told me you have forgotten. Mariposa shook his hand away with her wing. I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. I only remembered you when Albert told me he had summoned you. Don't think I will let you forget any time soon, Mari said wistfully. She let out a long exhale. I'll do everything to make up for what happened, Tabula squeaked, straining his guttural voice that made it sound like he was choking on something. It's always the same with you, Mari replied. She let out a humorless laugh which made Tabula nervously chuckle. I suppose that this place is a replication of the game you played, right? I recognized Lord Albert instantly, what with that demonic avatar of his. Yes. But don't worry, everyone is loyal to us. To you and your friends, I'm nothing to them. Tabula, I have a physical body now, which means I can be easily killed and sent back to the immaterial planes. That is worrisome. Let's go talk with Ains. He should be able to assign you an official position. And I will have a stern talk with Albert about how he handled your summoning. Don't bother. The god of trickery handled things well. He has Mistress Flournoy as his subordinate now. A feud between you and him will do no one any good. Mariposa turned around to finally face her husband. His new form was vastly different and would take some time to get used to. Not to mention the monstrous power he now possessed. What she expected would take dozens if not hundreds of lifetimes of constant growth was achieved instantly. But Demiurge hurt you, Tabula said, raising his voice. I'm fine. Just a bruise, nothing more. It would be more beneficial to know the hierarchy of this place. She approached her husband and let him embrace her again. I can't be too mad at my forgetful fool of a husband, it seems. What will I ever do with you? Tabula wrapped his long spindly arms around her, ignoring Mary's light jab. They both looked at each other before one eventually spoke up. Ains and Albedo will help us to sort it out and assign you an official position. I already made a request. Albedo. I remember her. You used my appearance for her. She looked up to face Tabula. Yes, our daughter. Oh, Ains is free, we can go right now. Before Mariposa could take in what her husband just said, both were standing in front of a massive door with 2 plate-clad undead by its sides. The doors were opened by an attractive human-looking maid who stepped aside with a bow. Inside awaited an undead with burning eyes, sitting behind a massive office table and a younger copy of her, in a white dress, standing beside him. The difference between them was that the other demoness was looking younger than her and instead of Mariposa's leathery bat-like wings growing out of her shoulder blades, she had the black feathered wings of a fallen angel. Mariposa, knowing better than to hesitate, started to kneel but was stopped by her husband. He grabbed her by her upper arm, pulled her back to her feet, and whispered. What are you doing? It's admirable that you want to show proper respect to Lord Ains, but the wife of my father is not required to do so. Albedo addressed the, now standing, demoness with a faint smile on her face, clearly satisfied with the display of loyalty from someone who was clearly of lesser ranking. Welcome to Nazareth. Before we begin, let me apologize for the poor reception. I hope you can forgive Demiurge's actions. He can be quite overzealous sometimes. Ains greeted her with a regal voice, though it was laced with a tinge of regret. It's the guild master from the game. A former human, no doubt. Oh, wait, I remember him. Momonga was his name, I'm pretty sure. He was always nice to my husband. It's a relief that someone like him is in charge, Mari thought to herself. Thank you. But the fault was mine. Lord Albert couldn't have known me and I acted improperly compared to my peers. So this is my wife Mariposa and your mother. We created you together. I think you can see the resemblance. Tabula addressed his daughter. Mother. Albedo's smile faded as she looked at the succubus with a barely hidden contempt. Mariposa paled at her husband's careless words. In some sense, she could be considered the mother of this young godlike demoness, but she likely felt no connection and was insulted by her father's words. She gulped and bowed her head and desperately tried to fix the situation. It's a pleasure to see you again, Lady Albedo. My dear husband, please make no such claims. Although I was an inspiration for your daughter's looks, I wasn't directly involved in her creation. It seemed to have the desired effect. Albedo's expression returned to a pleasant smile. Ains watched the interaction without any good idea on how to approach it. He could feel Albedo's anger seep out the moment Tabula announced that his wife was Albedo's mother. Still unsure how these things worked, Ains could at least assume it was partly the case and the demoness likely guided him while he was still just a human. She looks afraid. I can't blame her. We were two when Nazareth became real. What sort of position can we give her? He messaged Albedo. I think I can just create a position of a spouse of a supreme being. Please forgive my unsightly behavior, my love, but this succubus is not my mother and the only connection to her is that she is married to my father. I understand that, but don't you think your father would want you to get along with her? Ains once again had to play the diplomat and try to mend the situation Tabula was unwittingly creating. I will try. As long as she doesn't manipulate father to her own ends, I can be friendly with her. Albedo turned her head and flashed Ains a smile as she opened to Nazareth's personnel and changed Mariposa's position from a summon to the spouse of Tabula. It's done. From now on everyone in the Great Tomb will recognize Mariposa as your wife, father. Great. We will be on our way then. I will talk to you later, Ains, Tabula said, not hesitating to teleport away with Mariposa. Their sudden leave left behind a momentarily confused undead and succubus, with both of them wondering why Tabula was so eager to leave. The idyllic forest seen by a lake was getting disturbed by a large group of newcomers. An undead construction team leveled out a designated area even before all the building materials that would not be harvested locally were delivered. A small base of operations would be constructed to oversee the takeover of the forest area. Since no large nation had claimed it, the conquest of the monster-inhabited woods could be done covertly. The last one to step through the portal was Ains, followed by Aura and Mare. With them being a beast tamer and a druid respectively, both were tailor-made to oversee the operation. Buku's maternal overdrive had supposedly kicked in with evidence pointing to her adamance at refusing the twins to act on their own. In the end, even she couldn't deny that both Aura and Mare took their duties seriously despite their young age. She had to then hesitantly accept Ains's own words regarding how depressed the Dark Elves would be if they couldn't help with the building of the Empire. You two can start, and remember to call for backup if needed, Ains addressed the twins in a gentle tone. He began looking at his surroundings for a bit as Aura and Mare said their respective affirmations. This was the third time he was outside and the forest assaulted his senses with all kinds of new sensations. The birds chirping somewhere in the distance, bugs buzzing around looking for the next meal, and the pleasant scent of the vegetation. While Aura started to use her abilities to scan the forest for any dangerous beasts, Mare went for a more passive approach, sitting down to commune with nature to find out what sort of useful herbs grew in this part of the forest. Seeing they were at work, Ains felt it was prudent to not disturb them, and he decided to walk towards the lake shore. Although he was curious if he could even feel a bug biting him, there was no need to worry about it happening since the tiny creatures kept a distance from him, seemingly too afraid to offend the mighty Overlord. Or maybe they just didn't find his bare white bones appealing for a snack. Ains's non-existential ears were graced with the sounds of moving water. He saw to his left that there were large waves rocking back and forth in a slow and rhythmic lull. The pristine waters and its shining surface enticed him as though it was personally inviting him. Ains walked up to the very shore and extended his hand, casting Create Item. In the game, the spell could create any saved asset that fit the requirements of the spell, but now its only limits were the complexity of the item and the caster's own imagination. A row of about 10 identical wooden chairs with recliners appeared about 2 meters away from the shore. This should do it, Ains remarked to himself out loud. Satisfied with his work, he sat down in one of them and stared into the distance. The spot seemed perfect to build a small resort for outdoor activities. Cut down a few trees, even out the terrain, and not much else was needed. Sure, it wasn't one of those beach spots portrayed in the media, but for someone who couldn't dream to see the clear sky just a week ago, this was as close as it gets to having such an experience. I guess we could make the shore sandy and set up a lemonade stall. I'm sure everyone would like it. He quietly spoke to himself while imagining the scene. However, his daydreaming was not meant to last. A familiar voice echoed in his head, which Ains quickly determined to be from the dark elvish girl. Sorry for interrupting, Lord Ains. It seems that a creature is charging in our direction as we speak. It's pretty weak compared to the beasts on me and my brother's floor, but it's the strongest one I had located within this very forest. A beast, huh? I was wondering if they would sense Aura or Mare's presence sooner or later. I better go look at it myself. If there is ever so much as a scratch on Aura, Buku will be furious. Ains stood up and teleported the short distance, returning to the construction site. Aura was looking into the tree line with a palm over her eyes. The elven girl seemed completely unfazed by the rumbling sounds in the distance, which were slowly becoming louder. How strong do you think it is? Ains asked, preparing to cast defensive buffs on both him and the dark elves. Level 30 maybe. If the beast wasn't charging toward us, I likely wouldn't have paid it any attention, Lord Ains. Compared to other floor guardians, Aura had the casual speaking manner of a child. That did not dispel her credibility as someone who was well knowledgeable in the arts of beast taming. Whatever things she had to say about the incoming beast, Ains placed his full trust in the floor guardian. I see, I'll let you handle it then, Ains said with finality. He took a step back as Aura turned back to the growing disturbance with a grin on her face. If the beast was really that weak, offering help would be insulting to Aura. It would also be an interesting sight to see how the dark elvish girl would perform in an actual fight, as things worked a little differently here compared to Yggdrasil. The beast stopped in the shadows of the nearest trees, managing to hide their visage quite well. It then started to speak in an ominous, high-pitched voice, something that Ains was not expecting in the slightest. My domain invaded, you have. Pay dearly, you will. A long snake-like tail suddenly charged toward Aura's head. To the dark elvish girl, the speed of which the tail was moving was laughable. Without as much as breaking a sweat, Aura grabbed the tail with only one hand and swung it around, sending the massive beast crashing through the trees. Ains winced at the wails of the pain that the beast let out, though it was impressive to say the least that the beast landed in the clearing instead of dying one hit. What was more intriguing to him right now, though, was that he was now finally given a chance to take a good look at the mysterious creature. It was at least 2 meters tall and over 4 meters long, standing on all fours. Covered with very soft-looking silver fur, the beast had 6 faintly glowing runes on its body. What, is that a Jungarian hamster? Ains mumbled to himself. The rather round creature slowly rolled to its feet and tried to get the tail out of Aura's grip with no success. You know of such a creature, Lord Ains? Aura said out loud with a shocked expression. She then eyed the beast with ravenous glee, frightening the creature, who saw the dark elf's expression. My friend had a pet like this, only much smaller. The Overlord replied. Honestly, I can't see it other than that. Maybe, if we could subdue the creature, it could serve as Aura's pet. I think that would be a nice gift for her. As expected of my lord, even the monsters of this world can't escape your infinite wisdom. Not going to lie, but the fur looks so soft. Can I kill it and make a rug out of her skin? Aura pleaded, yanking the hamster's tail to get it closer. Bested am I to be spared, I ask? The creature let out a whine and lowered its head, shaking in fear. And now, hold on. This beast seems intelligent since it is able to speak. Don't you think we shouldn't be hasty to kill it and at least question the creature before doing something so rash? Ains asked Aura a question, curious about how she would respond. If that is your order, my lord. Aura shrugged. She turned to the creature and barked an order. Come closer and answer all of Lord Ains's questions. The hamster obeyed and with careful steps approached the scary-looking skeleton. Do you have a name? The Overlord said with as much calm as possible. He took a step closer as the creature pressed its head against the forest floor. The wise king of the forest, I am called. The hamster squeaked out the name. I don't see anything majestic about you, and seeing the lack of, well, you know, anyways, wouldn't it be queen? Indeed, my lord. Makes sense, it surely does. Many moons ago by the humans of this world, this name was bestowed upon me. I understand now. Now for my next question. You said we invaded your domain, how much of the forest do you rule over? If this hamster is the strongest creature around, maybe we can use it to subdue everyone living in her domain. Everything between the lands of the giant and the lands of the demon snake mine to rule over are. Spare me, my domain is yours now. Are there more like you? Ains asked, but seeing how the hamster's expression changed from frightened to saddened, the answer soon became clear to him. I have not met another of my kind. Failed my duty as a living creature and made an offspring, I had. The hamster spoke morosely, shaking her head. You are a unique creature, it seems. It would be a shame to kill you off, no. Aura, how about you add this hamster to your pet collection? Sure, Lord Ains. Aura began walking up to the best. She touched the hamster's nose with her palm and announced. You are my pet now, but Wise King of the Forest is too long, so I'll call you, Wisey. Honored to receive a new name, I am, Mistress Aura. Great. Wisey leaned in Aura's palm, a gesture that Ains found to be somewhat adorable. This reciprocated feeling of acknowledgement was only brief, however. The dark elf removed her hand from her new pet's nose and put her index finger on her own tip of the nose. But if Wisey controls this territory, it means nothing remotely strong can be found in the forest. In that case, why don't you train Wisey a bit and then take over her lands? Will do, Lord Ains. Aura saluted enthusiastically and jumped on Wisey's back, sitting down on the massive hamster cross-legged. You heard Lord Ains, let's go. Do as you command, I shall, mistress. Wisey gave a response to her new master with equal enthusiasm. As the newly tamed monster started to walk towards the woods, Ains issued an order to a few of the 8 edge assassins who were standing by the entire time. Look after them. If something threatens Aura, call for the backup team. As you command, Lord Ains. The invisible creatures heeded to the undead's command. They began skittering after the pair, staying true to their nature as born-bred lurkers of utter silence. Now that is done, I can check on Mare. Ains looked around and noticed that the boy had not moved, completely ignoring all the commotion around him. Did you find anything that we could use? Ains asked, approaching the boy. Mare opened his eyes, jumped to face him, and dutifully reported with an eager look on his face. It took a great deal of willpower for Ains to not start head-patting the dark elvish boy. There are few useful types of herbs growing near. I will gather test samples for Lord Tabula. That's good news. Oh, I guess I should give you a few helpers. Before Mare could protest, Ains extended his hand and summoned a small army of skeletons and a few liches. With next to no independent thought, their only use was either as sacrificial lambs or hard, physical labor. Thanks, Lord Ains, you are too kind. Mare bowed his head, clutching his staff closer to his body. Ains elected to give the boy a pat on the shoulder instead of the other gesture. You are doing a wonderful job, Mare. It is only natural that I would give you some help. Please do not hesitate to ask me, your mother or the others for help. Mare bowed again, this time with a blossoming smile on his face when he heard his master mention Buku, who was still formerly known as Lady Bukubuku Chigama, to him and his sister. With a light prance in his steps, he went off with the group of skeletons that were assigned to him. Now that they are busy, I could take a bit of the rest. The image of Albedo doing all his job for him flashed in his head. On the other hand, I should head back to Nazarick. We can take time off together afterward. The arena had become the place where Puro could be found most days. Today he was sitting in the first row beside his sister, who was munching on some sweets while reading through the study material given to her by Demiurge. In front of them were his 2 concubines, Etzli and Lupus, sparring in close combat. Obviously, Lupus was way above the vampire in terms of power and mostly gave little effort to train her. While Lupus was wearing her standard-made outfit she took great pride in, Etzli was dressed in tight leather pants and a corset instead of the vampire bride's default white dress. The latter's outfit was provocative, but then again, it wasn't Puro's pick in the first place. The 2 concubines had gotten permission to pick something for themselves in the treasury. Guided by her mischievous peer, Etzli has picked a costume that showed off her figure more than it protected her from damage, not that she needed much armor as a vampire in the first place. Thanks to her racial abilities she could only be killed by instant fatal damage, otherwise she would just regenerate over time. Thanks to Ains's obsessive collector habits, the treasury held enough armor to gear up every Nazarick denizen 10 times over, and that was including the pop monsters. This meant that lower tier gear was more or less up for grabs if one of the players gave permission to enter the treasury. Etsley, as the clear underdog of the fight, was trying her best to stay on the offensive, but more often than not it just ended with her being on the receiving end of not so gentle blows. Despite her nature, Lupus wasn't particularly sadistic towards her fellow concubine, but she didn't hold back that much either. And the results showed. Thanks to Etsley being one of the few who got the limit boost for testing purposes, she was steadily growing in power. After a particularly hard blow, the vampire was sent flying and collided with the wall just below where Puro was sitting. Be more careful. Puro shouted at Lupus and jumped over the wall to check on Etsley, who was already standing up with a stagger. I'm fine, my lord, she said as she put her dislocated shoulder back in place without even twisting her face in pain. Sorry. Lupus bowed, with her ears visibly drooping under her hat. Okay, you two take a short break. The rest of the Pleiades and one of the homunculus maids will be here soon, Puro said, gently patting Etsley's backside after she had gone to him. It didn't take long for the rest of Puro's new subordinates to arrive. With most of them being more suited to assassination-type missions, logically he was the one to take them under his wing. His long-term goal was to make each of them a team leader to be able to tackle lesser threats independently and, if need be, join up with the 7-star formation led by their youngest sister and deal with level 100 threats. Led by Oriole, the battle maids showed up through a gate one by one. The last to arrive was Fifth, one of the homunculus maids. While most of the Pleiades still had to wait for their turns to get their limit increased, with Shizou being the only exception, the homunculus maid was one who Ains picked for the test to see how a level 1 being would benefit from the boost. Like a small kid joining the bigger kids for the games, she followed the battle maids with a fierce expression. Lord Puro, we are ready to start the training, Oriole said as the entire group bowed. Great. Puro only nodded in response and then turned his head, seeing his sister preoccupied with a stack of papers she was holding. Hey, sis, you joining us? Or do I need to put them against each other? Buku looked up from the papers. Puro found it odd that his sister had a relieved look on her face. Sure, I can train with a few. Buku put away the reading material and jumped over the wall, landing next to her brother. So, who is sparring with me? I think Yuri, Shizou, and for a change, Lupus can go against you and I'll take rest while Oriole boosts them. Puro began to size them up one by one. Even with the immense boost Oriole provided to her sisters, 1 against 3 wouldn't be any sort of challenge for the siblings because of the massive level difference. Even multiple level 90 challengers could do little against someone who had reached level 100, and Pleiades with the boosts were still under that mark. Sounds good, Buku said. She motioned for the maids to follow her a bit further away. Etsley, you can take Fifth and show her some basic moves. Just remember she is still rather fragile and cannot regenerate. I will be careful, my lord, Etsley replied. With everyone having their assignments, they spread out and started the training. Although Solution, Intoma, and Narbril couldn't match his speed, they worked together like a team, making him break into a sweat from time to time. While Solution fought him in close combat with a pair of long knives, Intoma used her bug-type attacks to distract him and Narbril switched back and forth between close combat by attacking him with a sword and then switching things up with elemental magic. Obviously, just 3 of them weren't enough to defeat an over-level 100 player like him, and in about 20 minutes all 3 were brought to absolute exhaustion. The rest of Pleiades fared no better, not being able to get through Buku's impregnable defenses. One thing was clear, once all 7 got their limits increased, they would start to catch up, giving the siblings a much harder time in defeating the battle maids. Bonus story, united again. Tabula was laying in his bed with his wife's head on his shoulder. Since his now natural form wasn't built for enjoying time with his wife in mind, he had taken his old human form until he was sure he could reshape himself. Mariposa was trying her best to dig her nails into his husband's chest with a frustrated pout. It may have not been his fault that he had forgotten, but she still took it rather personally. Her old tactic was to drain him during the sex till he was unable to move and then barrage the foolish man she had decided to spend eternity with. Now this tactic was futile since Tabula had such a massive energy pool that she was practically bursting with power and couldn't even make a dent. Her attempts at causing mild pain were just as fruitless. Her long sharp nails were close to the breaking point while her husband's skin showed no signs of even registering her attack. At one point Mari had decided it was no longer worth it, and she finally gave up on finding a way to punish him. I am sorry for forgetting, Tabula apologized for the umpteenth time. He gently stroked Mary's head. Please don't be mad for what I've done to you. For the last time, I am not mad, Mari replied with a frigid tone, though it started to warm up towards her husband's touches. Mari. Not knowing what else to do right now, Tabula kissed her on top of her forehead. It seemed to be the right move as Mari nuzzled even closer to his body, and she turned her head to look into his eyes. I owe a favor to a traveler now. That bastard used my desperation. And I think Great Mother Lilith will be very angry with me because I went against her will and sought you out. Why would she be mad? She blessed our marriage. And what is this traveler? You have not mentioned that entity before. He asked, furrowing his brows. She told me to get over you. I think she fears the traveler. I am not supposed to talk about them. Their attention is not a good thing. Mariposa's voice betrayed her worries. How can it be? How can an infernal lord like Lilith be afraid of them? Mari, we swore to not have secrets between us. He turned his head to look away. I shouldn't, I'm sorry, but there are things I have not told you for your own good. She sighed, leaning closer and kissed his neck. Then tell me the truth. He didn't give in to her attempts at distracting him. As one who was married to a succubus, he knew their tricks far too well. You understand this will make Great Mother even more displeased with me. I risked everything to get here. She grabbed her husband's face with both hands. Mari, tell me the truth. We are in this together. Tabula said softly. You are right, I have been unfair. She gave him a small kiss on the lips and put her head on his shoulder once again. I only know of travelers because Great Mother came into conflict with one and lost something very important to her. We were all warned to never enter into a deal with a traveler. And I did just that. I don't know if he will ask in return, but I doubt it will be something trivial. She let out a long sigh and continued. What little I have been told about them is frightening. Apparently, they came from outside the ordered existence and are not bound by casualty. So they are some sort of creepy alien race that messes with things. Mari, I can't let you do this. When that traveler comes to collect his dues, I will offer to take your debt. Maybe that was his goal in the first place. I am nobody compared to what you are now. Mari wrinkled her nose as soon as the words escaped her mouth. A brief look of horror crossed her face in realization of something horrible, though the brain eater could only be left with confusion. Addressing his husband's concerns, she exclaimed with visible frustration in her voice. Damn it. How was I unable to see that? His goal likely was to get you to do something. How foolish of me. Then we will face him together. I don't care how powerful that entity is, I won't let anyone hurt you, Tabula said resolutely. No matter the odds, he would have to stand against this being. Even knowing that this traveler wasn't above using such underhanded tactics is making him forget his own wife and was powerful enough to make the infernal lord fear him. Immediately after Tabula made his bold declaration, there was a change in the air to what he could only describe as something wicked yet alluring. I love it when you are like this, Mari purred, reigniting the fiery mood in the air. You always manage to bring that part out of me, Tabula replied, not missing the change in his wife's lustful behavior. She suddenly pushed Tabula into the bed, getting on top of him with a mischievous smile. I believe we have a lot of catching up to do, in more ways than one. Edited by Zermeister. Proofreading by Ethel07, Detract, Sad_Smiles, Alessandro, and Visor Nixon. Anne, thank you for reading the story, and if you have caught up to the latest chapter, you can check out my other work or join my Discord server, link is in my profile where additional chapters are available or if you are interested in becoming a beta reader. Next chapter.